Where we've been moved about 8 feet, 10 feet to the left without any protective covering. And Hugh Millen is incredibly thankful that those sprinklers right there don't go 360 degrees. You'd be in trouble.
I think you are too.
Yeah, I think
you'd be in trouble as well. And most importantly, I think that equipment would be in trouble.
Yeah. They're just spraying the Russell Okung post, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
Or do you want to say the turf?
Yeah.
The turf's turf? Is that turf's turf over there? Dear. Here we are at the VMAC on a Wednesday morning. And before we start the day, before we start the show, as I like to say, Dick Fain just gave us some big news that happened yesterday in the world of sports that has, I think, some ties to the Northwest. I think some direct ties in the Northwest and potentially some indirect ties to the Northwest. What did Dick Fain just say? He just said that there was a major trade. What'd you call it?
Monster.
A monster.
Yep.
A monster trade in the NBA. And I have some thoughts on that if you'll indulge me here. I have a thought or two on that. Kyrie Irving, after all of this time, has been decided after being not happy in Cleveland and pushing and forcing and cajoling his way out of Cleveland, has been granted the trade that he's looking for. He's been traded. Well, I don't know if it's the one he's looking for, but they've been traded to the Boston Celtics for a package of players that includes none other than University of Washington product Isaiah Thomas. And while I know that there's other stuff involved, and maybe Dick Fain can tell us how important Jay Crowder is.
Good player.
I think I understand how important Brooklyn's number one pick or first round pick next year unprotected is. So maybe what I'm about to say is a little bit watered down and maybe not as impactful as what I was going to say. But can we just take a step back and think about where Isaiah Thomas came from and where he is now?
Yeah.
Was he not the last pick in the NBA draft?
Yes.
Dick Fain?
Yes, he was.
Was he the last pick? Now I know there's only 2 rounds, and so I know it's not like Mr. Irrelevant in the NFL where there's 7 rounds and the last guy that's picked is probably 7 times 32, 210 plus 14, 224. So I know that he's the 60th or 64th pick in the draft. But can you just imagine Isaiah Thomas, little Isaiah Thomas, who a lot of us, including myself, kind of scoffed at the notion that he was going to have any kind of an NBA career, would be the centerpiece a few years later of a deal that sends Kyrie Irving back to Isaiah Thomas's team. That number 60 or 64 in the draft, who had probably this much chance. We all probably assigned this much, and I hold my fingers an inch apart, this much chance of having any kind of an NBA career, has now played himself into a max type of contract, an all-star status in the NBA, and he's good enough that Cleveland would see a reason to trade, now with other things, Jay Crowder and the other. I understand, it's not a one-for-one deal. I get it. But Kyrie, and a lottery pick, more than a lottery pick, maybe even a high lottery pick. But Kyrie Irving was the number 1 pick in the draft. He was the subject of Nike. He's got shoes. He's got commercials. He's Uncle Drew. He's Uncle Drew. I mean, he's one of the stars, the showcase marquee stars in the NBA, right? He's one of the handful of 10 transcendent stars in the NBA.
And Kyrie Irving's game, there's the street ball, that emphasis on the one-on-one, not that he can't play in a team environment, but the emphasis on one-on-one, the great handle, the individual moves, the step back. You got to be able to shoot, but you got to be able to break people down on the perimeter with wicked, individual dribbling, and then ability to finish that around the rim. I mean, this guy is, if that's the street ball, and they even have a street ball league. If that's street ball, that guy is the number 1 street ball player. I might check myself, but I've given that a little bit of thought. I mean, for his brand of play, he is so unique. The Uncle Drew commercials. I mean, nowhere is there a guy more apt to do a commercial spot than him doing Uncle Drew.
I've never seen anybody finish in a final series the way he finished this last
You know,
game.
all of that being true, I guess I'm not getting the point across to you guys
But
where I am.
I
understand all of that. I think what I'm just trying to say, and it's really kind of, you guys are getting into the depth of it, which is probably more interesting. I'm just trying to take a step back and contemplate the success that Isaiah Thomas has worked himself into from this diminutive kind of point guard, shooting guard combo that all these teams thought he's not going to make it. To go from that to an NBA All-Star, max player, best player on a contending Eastern Conference team, and now be traded as the centerpiece of a trade that for a guy who is one of the transcendent players in the NBA for the reasons that you guys suggest. I just think that is really one of the terrific kind of feel-good. And I know that, Dick Fane, we always joke, didn't love him. Couldn't play on my high school team, that whole routine that he set off the air one day. But, I mean, come on, guys. I mean, the guy, look what the guy has made himself. It's amazing to me what he's made himself into.
I watched him at the Tacoma Dome in a playoff game, and he had 50, I believe 55. Absolutely, it was
against
50.
Vinoy Overton.
And he had like 20. I'm pretty sure 23 or 24 in the fourth quarter. And he was spectacular. And I think what's interesting, you watch him then at Washington. Of course, he had the Gus Johnson 25-footer at the end. As good a basketball call as I've ever heard on that game-winning shot. And he was able at every level, where his height, you'd think at some point his height would be the game stopper, but he's been able to elevate and hit the outside shot. But he has a brand of getting, of course, left-handed. Somehow it seems, no matter what the scouting report is, the left-handed just seems to find a way to freeze guys, even when they obviously know he's left-handed. But he has those runners, those runners in the lane, that creativity, his ability to, he's so creative. And it almost seems like the teardrop, the loft that he puts on the ball that he learned in high school, it's like he already knew he had to play in Giants, and even at high school, he had to find a way to develop those type of shots. And you're right, Mitch. It's really remarkable. I mean, I'll just say, years ago when Nate Robinson was early in his Washington career, probably a sophomore year, but bet a college buddy that he would not be an NBA player. Well, that bet cost me. Now, we had a great time, he and I and our wives, but that cost me a $700 dinner at Canlis, the fact that Nate Robinson was an NBA player. And so I probably, had I not been bit by that bet, I might have bet the same thing with Isaiah
You would have
Thomas.
lost again.
I'd have lost again.
You'd have lost a lot bigger.
Yeah.
If there was some sort of sliding scale on the amount of success, you would have lost 6 Canlis' dinners, because whatever Nate Robinson was, this guy has carved out just and think of now moving forward. And I don't follow the NBA like everybody else does. I don't know whether Boston's now replaced Cleveland. I know there's disarray with LeBron James, and now Kyrie Irving's not on that team, and maybe Boston's become the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. I don't know. What do I know? But Cleveland's still the showcase team in the East, because they have the guy. They have the best player on the planet. And so now, not only was Isaiah Thomas featured prominently in the playoffs and in national television events and NBA, now he's going to be running with LeBron. So he's gone from high school in Tacoma as an undersized, diminutive guard who may or may not be a good college player to an outstanding, unbelievable, clutch successful college player to a guy who's, he's probably not going to make it in the NBA, to a guy who's an all-star in the NBA and talking max contracts. And now he's going to be running with LeBron James, the greatest player on the planet. I mean, I just think you take a step back and you're really – there's just a guy – they say about certain guys in sports, and I don't know, maybe it's melodramatic, that just certain guys in sports, it doesn't matter – the vitals don't matter. The size, it's something about them that they – Doug Flutie
is best.
Right. They have whatever it is that allows them to overcome adversity that most in this world could never. They just have a knack or a way to figure it out, to just overcome their physical limitations. If there is such a thing as the it factor, if there really is such a thing as the it factor, this guy has the it factor. Yeah. He has just found a way. I mean, it's just amazing.
Offensively.
Well, I don't care. I mean, look at the paycheck next year. Look at that paycheck next year. Offensively, defensively, special teams, whatever it is.
Contract guy now?
Well, they're talking, as Dick Fain would tell you, I mean, I think they're talking max contract with this guy. I mean, he's going to be a $25, $30 million a year player playing with LeBron James. Now, LeBron, he only might play with LeBron James for a year, and then LeBron may. Now, the other local.
Just one quick. That playoff game, I want to get back to 55. I think he had a 50. Dick, do you remember? There was a 55-point playoff game he had this past spring, and he took over that game. That you can go back to the MJ at his prime. You can you couldn't have been more dominant than that guy in the fourth quarter. And again, and it was right back to why I was like, I feel like, of course I'm watching on TV, but I felt like I'm back at the Tacoma Dome because all of a sudden it was right around the same amount of points, 55.
Yeah.
And he put up 53 against the Wizards.
53 against the Wizards.
Amazing.
And
little Isaiah Thomas.
But the fourth quarter, he had over 20 in the fourth quarter. I think he might have had 29. It's coming back to me, I think he had 29.
He had 29 points.
He had 29, and so
it's just amazing.
Take Michael Jordan's greatest games. Did he ever have 29 points in the fourth quarter?
My guess is yes. But not many times. But my guess is yes, but the point is still the point, whether he has or he hasn't. Maybe a couple times.
Would you bet a ton of money that he had 29 in the fourth quarter?
In any game in his career?
In any playoff game.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what he did in that Boston game. That Boston game was the transcendent game. But I
bet he didn't have 29.
Okay.
He
probably didn't have 29 in the fourth
quarter. So, at any rate,
I remember Sleepy Floyd had the record forever.
Yes, Sleepy Floyd. Yeah. The hula hoop game.
Yeah.
He, with the Warriors against the Lakers.
Little Isaiah Thomas did something in the NBA playoffs that Michael Jordan probably never did. I mean, that's just – anyway, and then the other part to this is – and I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen? But as soon as I saw that there was a number one unprotected pick that went along with the deal to Cleveland, I started thinking, well, the Brooklyn Nets pick, they were 20-62 last year. They not only had the worst record in the NBA, they had the worst record by 4 games in the NBA. Could it be that young Michael Porter Jr. was traded last night in a deal with Isaiah when push comes to shove next year and Cleveland's getting Brooklyn's number 1, number 2 overall pick? Now, I know it's been complicated. This guy Bagley is supposed to be very good, who's coming out now into college ball for his 1 year. But could Michael Porter Jr. have been traded? Was he traded last night in a deal which could bring him to LeBron James? So could you imagine if LeBron James stays? Now, there's a big if. This is probably 10%, 15%. But if LeBron James stays and Isaiah Thomas is there, could you imagine that in a year and a half from now, we could be turning on the TV and watching Isaiah Thomas, Michael Porter Jr., and LeBron James playing on the same floor in Cleveland for the Cavaliers?
Because if LeBron doesn't stay, there's no way they're keeping Isaiah.
Right, so why would they do that?
They're going to blow the thing up if
right.
LeBron leaves.
Right. So,
we'll
see if he leaves.
I saw Anthony Allen in high school, great Garfield player. Heck, I went to the same high school as James Edwards, the Roosevelt 20-year guy in the NBA. Spencer Hawes, watched him at the Tacoma Dome. I mean, there's a lot of other guys.
No one's as good as this guy.
That he's the best player I've ever seen in the state of Washington. And the first time I saw him, I didn't come away. And first time I thought he was he's okay, but his line, he had 29 and 19.
Yeah.
But by the time I had seen him a handful of times, so that's the best player I've ever seen in the state of Washington.
Well, it's not only the best player that you've ever seen in the state of Washington. He's probably the best player that anybody's ever seen in the state of Washington.
Well, somebody tell me who's
better than that guy.
High school player
so,
than him.
Anyway, just some NBA thoughts on this blockbuster NBA trade that has Kyrie. So who's Kyrie Irving, real quickly, Dick? Who's Kyrie Irving going to play with? Who's left in Boston? The other guy from Tacoma's not there anymore, right? He's not there anymore. He got traded to the Detroit Pistons or something.
Yeah, Avery
So
Bradley.
it's just Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving?
That's
it?
That's a pretty good start.
Yeah, but that's not Cleveland, right? Is that even better than what they is Kyrie Irving?
They got
and Gordon
Al
Hayward?
Horford. They got Jaylen Brown. They got the number one pick. They got the top pick, Jason Tatum. They got Marcus Smart. I mean,
they better right now? Are they better right now than they were last year?
I think they are. But I just like Kyrie Irving better than Isaiah Thomas.
Okay. All right. Well, okay.
Gordon Hayward, you're talking about.
I don't think they're remarkably better.
Are they better than Cleveland?
I think they're incrementally better, and I think they can give Cleveland a game. But, I mean, are you really going to bet against LeBron James in an Eastern Conference Finals? Probably not.
So it's LeBron James, Isaiah Thomas, and Kevin Love.
Yes.
And
I would still lean Cleveland.
Okay.
But Boston's a lot better than they were last year.
So Isaiah Thomas is a betting favorite to be playing in the NBA Finals next year.
Gordon Hayward, of course, has moved himself into being an NBA superstar. And if you can remember him, Butler, he had that shot. He's about 3 inches high on the backboard. Otherwise, that's the greatest shot in the history of the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And yet my mind's eye watching him at Butler, Dick, just a skinny kid. And then I was in Salt Lake City a couple months ago, and David Locke hooked me up with some real good seats. And I could not believe how that guy transformed his body.
He's a man now.
And Dave and I were visiting at halftime. That's the first thing out of my mouth. I said, I just have this image of Gordon Hayward as this skinny-armed, skinny-legged kid at Butler. Hell, he looks like an NFL tight end.
Yeah.
I mean, his legs, top to bottom, and he's explosive and he's selfless. Got a pretty good shot, but a wide array of ability to score and kind of great court sense, real high basketball IQ on both ends of the court.
We'll see a great Eastern Conference Finals at least, which we haven't in most years. And the funny thing is, normally when you have a monster trade like this, Vegas odds shift one way or the other. Both teams are exactly where they were yesterday before the trade. It did not affect. So basically, Vegas said it was an even trade.
I saw, speaking of guys going off in playoff games and quarters, I was in Utah a few months ago for the playoffs, and I saw Gordon Hayward in the game that I attended. Gordon Hayward in a playoff game went for like 24 in the first quarter against the Clippers in like Game 3 of the Western Conference first round. Anyway, interesting other sports going on. We're sitting here at the VMAC. We're just to the edge of the playing field, playing surface. We've been moved over. What have we moved? South? What are we? Where we moved south?
Yeah.
We've moved south by 15 feet.
Inches.
32 inches is all we've moved? All right. I think we moved more than 32 inches, but 32 inches
48.
south, 48 inches south. No protective covering today, but who needs protective covering on a day like today? It's Wednesday. We've got an incredibly busy show as we do each and every day from the VMAC. You've got Hugh and I here. You've got Hugh and me here. You've got Dick Fain there, along with Jackson Feltz. We've got Seahawks at 7. Jackson, you have 6:20 and 16, 17, 18, 19, 20?
I do.
Okay, good. So we've got the Seahawks at 7 and 40 minutes from right now. We've got the Daily Schnoz training camp, 2 more training camps with some more fantasy football drafting advice from those training camps. We've got the Heritage Distilling text line. We've got poll questions that could net you 50-yard line seats to see the Cardinals and Seahawks on December the 31st. We've got phone polls. We'll hear from Tom Cable. We'll hear from Jason Lockenfora. We'll have another edition of the 12th Man Roundtable. We have got a lot to do on a Wednesday. It's the Wednesday before the Friday, right? Friday night, Kansas City. The all-important Game 3 is going to be here in Seattle this year against the Kansas City Chiefs. All the starters are going to play, or most of the starters are going to play into the second half. And so we're going to make some final decisions on the roster. If there was ever a game to go to, by the way, if you were ever going to attend a preseason game, this would be the game to go to. I think it's fascinating on a lot of fronts. Hugh Millen is here to talk about how fascinating it is as we continue on a Wednesday from the VMAC. Yes, sir. Live from the VMAC, La La Land in the background. Hugh Breedlove Millen and Mitch of the Morning. On a Wednesday morning, practice will resume as they get themselves ready for Friday's preseason game number 3. As I like to say, the all-important, people probably snickering, the all-important preseason game number 3. You probably, well, you didn't. Your preseason games number 3 weren't as important as they. You probably can remember some preseason game number 4s where you were like stressed out.
Yeah,
that you were stressed out. You were like, I better, when I get my chance, I better put my best foot forward. Otherwise, I may be out of a job. Right? That's not. That's like Survivor, right?
Yeah,
that's
I've
reality
had
show.
Times where I felt like I was safe. I've had times where I felt like I better giddy up, and probably the most memorable for me in that regard, with Jacksonville, the city was trying to put their best foot forward to impress the NFL to get a franchise.
Yeah, which I can't believe they ended up being successful.
So we were playing in the what bowl would have been Gator Bowl, right? So we were playing in the Gator Bowl, and we're playing the Buffalo Bills, and this was just at the onset of the Buffalo Bills four-year run to the Super Bowl. So they were a real good team. I mean, and I had to in a sold-out Gator Bowl.
You were on who?
I was on the Atlanta Falcons.
Okay, you were going up against like Scotty Campbell and those guys.
and Darryl Talley and
no, Scotty Campbell. No, I'm asking
Scotty
who you were vying for the quarterback job.
Yeah, Scott Campbell.
Yeah,
Purdue All-American.
Yeah,
and
Chris
Miller.
How much time did you get in that game? Did they give you enough time to spread your wings?
I know I played the entire second half. I was playing in the second quarter. Probably. I don't know if I was in the first quarter, but it was probably 3 quarters.
Your NFL mortality.
Yeah.
I mean, you were pondering what happened. Where do I go next if I don't get this job? So it worked out,
right?
Well,
the worst situation. Yeah. Well, actually, the week before, we're playing in Philadelphia, and I had maybe the worst pass of my entire life, at least big-time football life.
Now, just last week, you said you saw the worst. Blake Bortles threw the worst pass that you've ever seen in NFL football.
Yeah.
Where does yours rank on
the same?
Okay.
Yeah. Right. I'll give myself a 1%.
A feather?
Just so I can sleep at night, knowing that I didn't have the worst.
Was it Bortles plus a feather?
Yeah, it was a feather better than Bortles.
Okay.
But we're playing at Philadelphia in the Veterans Stadium, and it's in the fourth quarter. I think we had a chance. It was winnable. We had a third down, and we had a guy open in the flat, and I throw it right in the ground. Just throw it in the ground. And my arm, I hadn't kept my arm, whatever it was. I just cheesed the throw. Just absolutely
cheesed it.
And I'm standing there, and I come back to the sideline. I'm looking high up in the lights of Veterans Stadium. I remember looking up at the lights. And I'm just going, what the hell's wrong with me? And I started thinking about going back to graduate school. Like, I'm going to go get an MBA. That had been my plan. Yeah. Although I had already calculated everything all through undergrad and everything. Like, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to go get an MBA, see where that takes me. And so I'm starting thinking, well, study for the GMAT. I'm going to go get
You're
an
actually
MBA.
Having these thoughts on the sidelines?
On the sidelines, looking at the lights in Veterans Stadium, wondering how I could throw, how I could possibly and I throw it. It was to my left. I don't remember what I was
Jerry Glanville was the coach?
No.
Who was the coach?
It was Marion Campbell.
Marion Campbell.
Rod Dowhower was offense coordinator. So in the film study, he's up in the meeting. He says, if we can't make this pass, we can't play. And
oh my God,
he was right.
Yeah,
he was dead right. But we got the ball back, and then. In that game, in that Philadelphia game, we went down and scored. We scored. Maybe at that point they had kicked the field goal. Anyways, we got a drive down, and I had some good passes, and we went down, and I kind of got my confidence back.
And the GMATs were out.
And then
the GMATs were out at that point.
Then all of a sudden, okay, man, maybe we can put this in the back.
So then the next week you played in the Gator Bowl, and that's when you won the job. All right. Morning montage from the Carter Volkswagen studio. Mariners no good last night in Atlanta.
Up the middle, Segura smothers it. And they got the runner hung up between third and home. Zunino running him back. Oh, and then Seager can't hold on. Here comes the runner home. He scores. Oh.
So their defense in the last 2 games has gone down the toilet. Mariners lose, fall back to a game over 500 in a couple of games. behind the wild card in the American League. All right, Albert Pujols is still hitting home runs, I guess, for the Angels.
Center field, DeShields, back track, wall, out of here. It's number 610. And Albert Pujols.
The Minnesota Twins continue to set the pace for wild card number 2 in the American League.
And that ball's crushed to center field. Long run. And that ball's gone. Rosario with an opposite field 2-run homer. And like that, boy, the Twins now lead 4-1.
The Royals win and jump ahead of the Mariners in the wild card race.
Swung on line, right center field. That's going to roll all the way to the wall. Hosmer around second, on his way to third. He is around third. He will score. Salvi's first hit since coming back from the disabled list is an RBI double, and the Royals lead 3-0.
And Tampa Bay tries to keep its wild card hopes alive last night.
Here's a swing and a drive to right field and deep. Aoki's going to turn around and watch how far this one goes. All the way to the back row and bangs off of one of the advertisements there in right center. It's a solo shot for Corey Dickerson, his 23rd. And the Rays take a 2-1 lead here in the second.
Do you say advertisements or advertisements? I like a guy who says advertisements.
No, that sounds really hoity-toity.
It is hoity-toity.
Yeah.
Advertisements.
That's
the broadcaster just said Corey Dickerson hit a home run off the advertisements in left field.
That's a little too tea and crumpets for me.
That is?
Yeah.
All right, advertisements then. I don't want tea and crumpets. Houston Texans head coach Bill O'Brien has decided to start Tom Savage at quarterback over prized rookie Deshaun Watson.
Tom has been here for 4 years. He's really, the way that we want to play, the style that we need to play relative to, getting guys lined up, relative to cadence, relative to protection points and route reads and putting guys in the right spot. Tom's ahead of Deshaun on that.
I would think that former player rep Hugh Breedlove Millen would have a thought about current NFLPA president, former offensive lineman of the Seattle Seahawks, and now offensive lineman for the Cincinnati Bengals, Eric Winston, after saying that he agrees with the executive director of the Players Association that there's going to be a work stoppage in 2021, when he was asked the follow-up question of what if a work stoppage is the beginning of the end for the NFL, and there is no NFL in 20 years. Here's what his response was. I thought it was interesting.
Honestly, I don't care, and I don't think the guys in this locker room care whether this thing's going to be around in 20 years because none of us are going to be playing. So if these guys want to own for a long time, then they can own for a long time, but another work stoppage might kill the golden goose.
Now, I don't know. Maybe I'm making a lot about nothing, but he's the president of the NFL. He's the player president of the Players Association. He is representing, I would think he's representing directly all the players that play and indirectly the players that are going to follow him and the health of the game. He's got to be in for the health of the game. And he's saying, I don't care whether the NFL goes away in 20 years because I'm not going to be playing in 20 years, so what do I care? That just seems like a petulant, irresponsible remark from a guy in a position of power. Do you agree or disagree?
I think it's an appalling comment. I think it's obviously selfish when you think of, myself and many, many hundreds of players in 1987. I lost 3 game checks that I never got repaid for, and at that time when I came into the league, there was what was termed player indemnity. Joe Montana, Super Bowl winner, when his contract expired with the 49ers, he was still the property of the 49ers. 10 years into the league, right? And his only leverage in negotiation was, well, Eddie DeBartolo, how do you think you look without me?
Right.
That was it.
That's it. Not me going somewhere else.
Yeah, and so the money that these guys are making, now in free agency, there's people that had to pay the way. I wasn't there in '82, but they had a strike in '82, and so a lot of people came before them. And by the way, guys like me, we have pensions tied to the health of the league. In a way, you could make an argument. For example, when I watch the Super Bowl, that it's in my best financial interest to root for a really good game so that the ratings are off the hook and the TV contract, the health of the league just keeps growing. So, but that point notwithstanding, just the fact that he would not have a sense that he would not have a sense that in a $13 billion league that is all generated from fan interest, for him to be so utterly tone deaf as to, not just, the image and how the fans would receive that, but how he's commenting for players in a way that's so recklessly irresponsible in terms of projecting the image of the players.
Right.
You got 2,000 players. Maybe 1,990 of them would just say, "Why don't you go to hell with that comment?"
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That I don't know. That is appalling to me that he would have that.
I figured you'd say as much. Jabril Peppers explains the joint decision of 11 Cleveland Browns players to kneel during the national anthem on Monday.
We got to unite in some way. It's too much hate in the world, and we just wanted to. Come together as men. We're all high-quality men who were taught, stand up for what you believe in. Everyone has different methods. This was our method. We're not trying to disrespect the flag or, be a distraction to the team. But as men, we have the right to stand up for what we believe in, and we demonstrated that.
Boston Celtics GM Danny Ainge on the big trade last night, Isaiah Thomas for Kyrie Irving.
As you can imagine, I'll leave it to your own imaginations to realize how difficult that conversation might have been for me and for Isaiah. And I will say that Kyrie was very excited about coming to the Celtics.
There you go. The big news in the world of sports, the Kyrie Irving to the Boston Celtics for Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, and a first-round draft choice next year that's unprotected, and it belongs to the Brooklyn Nets, or it belonged to the Brooklyn Nets. So you can see Cleveland's going to get – LeBron's going to have to make a decision whether he's leaving, staying, or going, and he has to base that opinion somewhat on the fact that his team, Cleveland, could have the number one overall pick, probably the odds-on favorite right now. Not better than 50-50, obviously, but the odds-on favorite compared to everybody else to have the number one overall pick in the NBA draft, Michael Porter or this guy Bagley, who's just come into the class of 2017. Anyway, the Seahawks at 7, big preseason game number 3 coming. Greg Bell, 2 familiar names were eliminated from the race for the starting left tackle position. We'll tell you who those names are next. Seahawks at 7 with Greg Bell, Seahawks Insider. Daily Schnoz, Heritage Distilling text line. Hugh's got something to say at 8 o'clock. We're going to give you a chance at 8:30 to win 50-yard line seats to see the Cardinals and Seahawks. It's all coming as our coverage of the preseason for the Seattle Seahawks continues on 950 KJR from the VMAC. Sports Radio 950 KJR has teamed up with Target Zero and Shuttle Express to bring you the ultimate ticket giveaway. Log on to sportsradiokjr.com. and enter for a chance to win a huge prize. Maybe a pair of tickets and black car round trips to the Doobie Brothers or the Eagles, Katy Perry, CenturyLink, Safeco Field, Husky Stadium, football games, baseball games, no basketball games. Remember, drunk, drugs, or high, it's a DUI, so always travel safely. We continue from the VMAC. We're 13 minutes away from the Seahawks at 7, and I can only imagine that Greg Bell of the Tacoma News-Tribune, Hugh Breedlove Millen, will have plenty to say about Tom Cable's remarks yesterday. Tom Cable tried to clarify, at least they asked him to clarify the left tackle, the very muddied left tackle position for the Seattle Seahawks. And he unequivocally said a few things. Number one, Ethan Posick. He almost bristled at the notion that he would even try Ethan Posick at the left tackle. He gave a resounding no to whoever asked him, and the member of the media that asked him, hey, how about Ethan Posick at left tackle? No. And that was it. So Ethan Posick's not playing, unless you take him for a liar. Ethan Posick, he has no plans to try Ethan Posick at left tackle. So he's out. Then he was asked about, or before that, he was asked about Luke Jokel, who has played left guard and left tackle, at Jacksonville. Not very well, either one, although Tom Cable disagrees. Pete Carroll said after the game when George Fant got hurt the other night, he said, it's a good thing that we have Luke Joeckel actually expressing something about his versatility and his ability to play both of those positions. When he was asked about who might play left tackle, Pete Carroll said it's a good thing we have Luke Joeckel, clearly inferring that Luke Joeckel was a possibility at left tackle. Not according to Tom Cable yesterday. Tom Cable made it pretty clear he is going to do everything he can to keep Luke Joeckel at left guard for stability along the offensive line. Because Luke Joeckel was so good in that first series at left guard. He wants to keep him at left guard. So he's out. So who does that leave? This is like watching a real-life version of Survivor.
By the way, I think, it's worth noting that he said we learned a lesson. He goes, take us back to 12 months ago.
Yes.
And I'm paraphrasing. But
yes.
He said we did too much of this roster juggling on the offensive line.
Right.
Or I should say
position juggling. Yeah.
Positional juggling,
yeah. So we're down to two guys,
yeah.
and I know that Dick Fane's going to call me a negative Nelly. Here they go again. Here goes Hugh and Mitch again. We've got a Super Bowl contending team, and all they are negative. And I'm sure that a lot of our listeners echo Dick Fane's remarks. But just think of this for justice. Can somebody just play with me on this for a second? We are down to 2 weeks before the regular season opener. The left tackle is your $22 million a year quarterback's blind side. We're talking about a Super Bowl contending team. And they are the two combatants. Can we just take a step back and look at who's competing for the left tackle job? One guy no one had ever heard of 36 hours ago, not 36 months ago, 36 hours ago. Even the Seahawks didn't even know who he was.
Yeah.
He wasn't even good enough to probably make the Philadelphia Eagles team as the 10th offensive lineman, let alone the starting left tackle. Matt Tobin is his name.
Yeah.
He's one combatant.
Yeah.
And the other guy, a week ago, you would have laughed at the notion he would start anywhere on the offensive line, Reese Odiombo, let alone the starting left tackle, the most prominent position. That's what we're down to. It's either Reese Odiombo or Matt.
Yeah.
Now, think about the insanity of that. This is not the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is the effing Seattle Seahawks are down to Matt Tobin and Reese Odiombo for the starting left tackle job.
No, I think you articulate it well, Mitch, and I think that it's just the way you talking about quickly the negativity. I was on the Cowboys during that run of 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, and that's just how fans. When you get to the very highest pinnacle, that team had the number 1 overall defense. They had like 4 Pro Bowl linemen. They had Moose Johnson and Emmett Smith. It was crazy how talented that. Michael Irvin, Hall of Famers everywhere,
all over the place,
and Pro Bowlers everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's just natural to look. Okay, well, where's the weakness? Well, Larry Brown. We got Kevin Smith on one side, great corner, but Larry Brown. Oh my God, Larry Brown stinks. So I think that a club, when you get to the highest level, it's already a foregone assumption. We know how great they are defensively, and how talented the quarterback is, and all of that. So I think when a team gets to that level where you say, look, you're in the discussion to win a Super Bowl, and then you say I think it's just human nature. You say, God bless us, we got all this talent, but where's the weak spot that could crumble the whole thing down? Well, weak spots are the tackles.
Yeah.
The weak spots are the tackles. And the tackles.
How many years have I been, and many other people, now I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but how many years have many of us been pleading with the Seahawks to call Cleveland about Joe Thomas?
Yeah.
Imagine had they done that a year and a half, whenever we started the conversation.
Yeah.
It was like 2 years ago. Imagine had they just done it. Whatever it took at the time, maybe they overspent, maybe they overcompensated Cleveland. Imagine if they just done it and that they would have had him for last year. Imagine the difference Joe Thomas could have made on this football team last year. They could have been playing in the Super Bowl. He might have been the difference between playing in the Super Bowl and not. And now he'd be, outside of injury, of course, he'd be the starting left tackle of this team this year. and we would have nothing to talk about on 950 KJR.
Well,
nothing to talk about if they just did it.
I'll be watching Andre Whitworth. He was a acquisition by the Rams coming out of Cincinnati, where you'd say, okay, this could be a quality left tackle. You only get him for 2 years. You have to pay a lot of iron for him, but there's some How well did Alex Mack, the center from Cleveland,
unbelievable,
work
a huge
out
difference,
for a gigantic
difference
down in Atlanta?
And he's a center,
for the number one offense in the NFL. They literally were the number one offense in the NFL, the Falcons, and a huge part of it was a free agent acquisition at the center position.
Odiombo v. Tobin for the starting left tackle job for the Seahawks. Who's going to win, and why are the ratings up, the television ratings up for the Seahawks preseason games? That and much more. All the news of the morning. Seahawks at 7. Seahawks insider Greg Bell next on 950 KJR. M's lose to the Braves last night, 4-0. Seesaw back to 1 game over 500, 2 back of the wild card Minnesota Twins. The Angels and Royals are in between, 35 games to go. Tony Zick, the latest to go on the DL. Flexor bundle strain. Dan Altavilla back on the big club. Whoopee. By the way, the Seahawks at 7, Greg Bell holding. We'll get right to it. Something we do, a daily tradition. Greg Bell, Seahawks insider for the Tacoma News Tribune, will be with us here in a moment to tell us all the top stories from yesterday and today. It's things you need to know on the Seahawks on this Wednesday morning. All right. Then there were 2. For now, Tom Cable says either Reese Odiombo or newly acquired Matt Tobin will be the starting left tackle. Says the team is doing everything possible to keep Luke Jokel at left guard, and immediately rejected the idea out of hand of rookie Ethan Posick being a possibility. Also, ratings for the first 2 preseason games, this is interesting, substantially up from last year viewing. Kyrie Irving shipped to the Celtics, package including Isaiah Thomas. Jay Crowder also goes to Cleveland. So does Brooklyn's unprotected first-round draft choice. Could that be Michael Porter Jr. going to play with LeBron James a year from now? A source is telling ESPN that Odell Beckham Jr. might miss a game or 2 of the regular season with that sprained ankle suffered on Monday night. Steelers holdout running back Le'Veon Bell suggests in a tweet that he'll return to the club on September the 1st. That is exactly 1 day after their final preseason game. Intriguing story in Minneapolis, at least for me. Andrew Wiggins has filed paperwork to terminate his relationship with star agent Bill Duffy. All of this with a 5-year, $148 million contract, max deal, that has been offered to him that Bill Duffy negotiated on the table, and he wants to get rid of his agent before he signs the contract. Now, the NBA Players Association has guidelines and rules that state that the agent still should be compensated if it's proven that he negotiated the deal, even if you try to terminate him before you sign the contract. Interesting stuff from the world of the NBA and Andrew Wiggins. All right, hit the button. Let's go. 7:03 on 950 KJR. Here we go.
Very happy with how things have turned out through the offseason and getting our guys together.
Live from the VMAX.
Wilson going to run. Diving for the end zone. He's in.
This is the Seahawks at 7 with Mitch in the morning.
Touchdown, Seahawks.
Seahawks at 7, Greg Bell, Tacoma News Tribune, Seahawks insider. We love the fact that he's with us and agrees to be with us on a daily basis at this time. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. Thank you, Mitch. How are you?
I'm good. We spent the last segment with Hugh Breedlove Millen out here at the VMAC. It's nice. We're waiting for your presence. We talked about the insanity that one of the great franchises, one of the best teams in the NFL, one of the Super Bowl contending teams, a couple of weeks before opening day, are deciding between Matt Tobin and Reese Odiombo to be the left tackle protecting the blind side of $22 million a year quarterback Russell Wilson. One guy no one had ever heard of, even the Seahawks probably 72 hours ago. And the other guy we would have laughed and scoffed at the notion that he would be anywhere near a starting position on the offense. That's what it's down to. Tobin and Odiombo. Who do you like? Is that like McGregor and Mayweather, or who do you like in this battle, this heads-up battle?
Yeah, you put it pretty succinctly. That's kind of how it is at the moment. Now, that's what Tom Cable said yesterday. I think they are begging, pleading, praying that one of those two become passable in the next 2 preseason games so they don't have to move Luke Jokel and upset the whole apple cart. I think they're going to end up doing that. I think that Reese Odiombo has been too slow inside at guard, so he's going to be slower outside at tackle against the edge rushers that. And Kansas City's got a good front, and they're going to play their defensive line and outside pass rushers and the guys they pay big bucks and some Pro Bowl guys. They're going to play them into the second half Friday night, and Odiombo's going to play for much of that time. And so we're going to see if Odiombo suddenly improves in a matter of 5 days. And then he said Matt Tobin's going to play as well, Cable did. And Tobin just got off the plane yesterday. Cable didn't even meet Tobin until they were on the practice field. Pete Carroll didn't either.
Weren't you and I standing there when we saw Cable go over to him? Yeah.
And you were right in your supposition that he was in getting a physical. He actually was. And that's why he didn't come out at the beginning of practice. So Cable, when you and I saw Cable kneeling at Tobin's feet while he was stretching, Cable told us afterwards that he was actually telling him what the plays were. He was telling him how we call this blind call, and this is what this means, and this is what that means. And Tobin was saying, well, I know what this is. I don't know this, but I'll learn this. And so the rest of practice, Cable was guiding Tobin around, grabbing his shoulders and kind of moving him around like you would maybe a 4-year-old. That's what they're at right now, and that is all because they do not want to move Luke Joeckel. Now, they know Joeckel has played 3 seasons, 30-plus games of NFL starts at left tackle. And that is in their hip pocket if they want it. They just don't want to move him because that would then move. They would have to move someone else to left guard. Who we're going to put there? And if we do want to move Glowinski to left guard, who played there and started there last year for this team, then we need a new right guard potentially. Or do we move Udaya Bush? There's a bunch of at the end of August. It's too much. And Pete Carroll or Tom Cable said yesterday, we saw last year what happened when we had to move a bunch of guys around in multiple positions, and it didn't work.
Right.
And so that's what they're trying to avoid. And I think, absent a offensive tackle coming out of the sky like a meteor and hitting them in the head, which at the end of August, it's very, very pricey. I hear Joe Thomas and I hear Brendan Albert, all these names. That's costing money and draft picks and collateral that they don't want to give up.
Well, just think about this.
I think it's going to end up being Luke Joeckel. I really do.
Well, just think about this on the Joe Thomas, and I mentioned this last segment. And look, hindsight's 20/20, but for a lot of us, it's not hindsight. When we first started talking about Joe Thomas years ago, right? It's years ago already. We're talking about Joe Thomas. Had they just bit the bullet and traded a future, maybe late number 1. Or number 2. I mean, they could have traded Malik McDowell's draft spot for Joe Thomas, a guy that is not even going to probably play for them this year. They could have had him for 2 years, portions of 2 years. He could have been the difference maker last year in them going to the Super Bowl. And, of course, look where he would be right now. Look at the savior that he would be right now if he were on that team. If they had just acted somehow, some way, and overpaid Cleveland for Joe Thomas when we first started talking about it, boy, oh boy, life would have been a much easier place. And I don't know that we would have had shows on 950 KJR. I don't know that we had any topics to talk about.
We don't know that the Browns would have ever traded Joe Thomas because the Seahawks aren't the only offensive tackle needy team. Now, nobody is as needy as urgently as now the Seahawks are after Fant's injury. But the fact that nobody got Joe Thomas, and Cleveland took calls. The Seahawks aren't the only team that called or even thought about it. The fact that they didn't trade him means that, one, the sum was too kingly. It was too expensive for any NFL team. And we don't know if the first-round draft pick would have gotten Joe Thomas.
Right.
And Thomas is there. I read a lot of stories that says Thomas wants to finish his career in Cleveland. Not that would necessarily block a trade, but a team that's had him since they drafted him would try to go to his wishes as well. So a lot of that argument is supposition that, well, we could have just thrown this draft pick and this, maybe not. And as we've seen, the Seahawks, I mean, Justin Britt's the first guy they've spent more than $1.50 on as an offensive lineman that they've homegrown or even wanted to re-up. They haven't gone out in the free agency world to get somebody of a Joe Thomas even close to his stature. And this goes all the way back to 3, 4, 5 years ago when this team decided we're going to pay our secondary, we're going to pay our quarterback, we're going to pay our wide receiver, and we're going to roll the dice with everybody else.
Yeah.
And that dice roll has caught up to him.
Here's one Seahawk fan's opinion. I'm going to give you one Seahawk fan's opinion. It's going to be mine. And you can say what you like. Respond as you wish. If I'm convinced as a Seahawk fan that Luke Joeckel at left tackle, let me use Hugh Millen's favorite word. If Luke Joeckel is even a feather better than either Tobin or Odiombo, my desire as a Seahawks fan would be to move Joeckel to left tackle. I'm going to tell you why. Because I think the guy that they'd move in at left guard is better than Luke Joeckel at left guard. So think about the math on it. Do the math on that. Whether it's Glowinski or whether it's Ibushi, I think they would be doing an upgrade at the guard position. So if you can convince me that Jokel's a feather better than either one of those two left tackles, I think the offensive line is better with Joeckel at left tackle and either Ibushi or Glowinski at the left guard. What say you about that?
Well, at this very moment, based on performance up to now, Jokel's more than a couple feathers better than the two they've putting in at left tackle.
Okay.
To hear them tell it, Joeckel is a better left guard than a left tackle. Now, they keep saying that as propaganda, perhaps, but they believed it enough that they spent their entire offseason and $7 million guaranteed and their first two preseason games having Joeckel at left guard. So now they've invested all that time, and that's what they don't want to go back on here, even though they may be forced to. The most logical option remains Joeckel to left tackle, and it's just a dominoes effect that they are trying to avoid right now.
Okay, let's move on, and we'll let you go and say hello to you in person at 9:30 with the 12th Man Roundtable. Greg Bell, Tacoma News-Tribune, Seahawks insider on a daily basis, setting up the day for the Seahawks. Every day at this time, you can count on it and put it in your day timer or your phone or what have you. What are the storylines? What are the interesting storylines from yesterday and as we creep closer to the quote-unquote all-important preseason game number 3 with the Chiefs on Friday night? Greg.
Well, I found it interesting that I finally, when C.J. Prosise wasn't out there yesterday at practice, and you and I saw him wearing a bucket hat, a groin injury. So I asked Cable, who's also the run game coordinator, I said, are you concerned that this isn't the first injury and he keeps getting hurt and he's not on the field? And Cable point blank looked at me and said, we all are. And then he went into a little bit of you got to be on the field, and we think we have could possibly have an elite offense, which means we need all our pieces out there. And it was the first time anybody of authority has said, man, this guy can't stay healthy. We got to get – what's his story? Is he going to get on the field? Is he ever – it was definitely a message through the media to C.J. Prosise to get going. And after practice, he was running on the side and running with the trainer and not running all that hard, just testing. But he did the same thing on Monday. And now here we are on Wednesday, and then if he does not practice today, it's unlikely he'll play on Friday from the strained groin he got before the preseason. And I wrote a story today in the News-Tribune listing all his injuries he's had in the last 16 months since he became in the NFL. He's become the ultimate tease for the Seahawks, the dynamic, athletic burst of speed and surprising strength we saw against New England and Philadelphia in those games in November last year is such a small subset and such a small sample size because of all these injuries.
Yeah.
And so they have a large part – we've talked about this yesterday. They have a large part of their playbook devoted just to number 22 and what he can do on third down and wide receiver-type plays at running back, splitting them out wide in motion and all kinds of stuff. And they can't count on employing it because he can't stay on the field. So that was the first time I've seen frustration from the Seahawks about C.J. Prosise.
You know, I think I said this to you. I think I've said it to you. I'd love to get Hugh's take on this when you get off the phone. You know, as a team in the NFL, when your doctor investigates an injury, and I don't know that this is the case with C.J. Prosise. I'm speculating here, but they do MRIs, they do X-rays, they do all those tests. They see nothing with the groin, right? It's possible that they look at the groin. There's no discoloration. There's no swelling. There's no visual signs, and in the tests or with the eyes, that there's anything wrong with the groin. You just have a player that's just saying, "Trust me, it doesn't feel right." right? That's
possible. Yes, Pete Carroll
and,
said there was no structural damage, and MRI showed that, right?
And we don't know, but we don't think that there's discoloration. We don't think there's swelling. We don't think.
I haven't checked that, Mitch.
Well, I know that, but I'm just guessing here. But the point is, if what I'm saying is true, let's just say what I'm saying is true. It's got to be maddening for an NFL football team, right, to just have a guy say, "I can't play. I just can't play. I don't feel right." And it's time after time after time with this. At some point, you have to wonder to yourself, if you don't see any structural damage, you don't see any pulls, you don't see any tears, you don't see any discoloration, you don't see any swelling, there's got to come a time, if this happens over and over again with a series of injuries where a player just can't play, where you say, this is a guy who can't play through, you know, unless his body is 100%. There are certain players in sports, I know it's a slippery slope, whether it's baseball, basketball, or football, you come across them who you just wonder, does that guy have to be 100% perfect, feeling perfect about himself, to be willing to go out there and play? And there are other guys in sports, most of them, that feel, you know, sore. You can include Hugh on this, feel sore on a day-to-day basis or what have you, that just go out and play because that's just part of the job. You're not going to feel perfect every time.
Yeah, no, I think you articulated the concern very well there. I mean, in the old days, they used to say there's German sports cars like Porsches and BMWs that, you know, they were reliable. And then there's English sports cars that look great, you know, Jaguars and Triumphs and all this stuff. They look great. Really temperamental. It just, you know, terribly mechanically. They have to be, as you said, just perfect.
That's the past. Engine, for our sponsors deal, just so that our sponsors know, that was an old
I'm 53,
thought.
So
okay. This is not now. Sponsors don't call.
Back in the 70s, that was just kind of the thought,
all right? Yes.
And so
not necessarily the case anymore.
So I would say,
okay.
Where's the Nike to get the Nike out of my shoe?
We'd like to come back tomorrow and have the key card work.
What do you think, Greg? You know, but you know, just a temperamental sports car. Look, they're great, but man, they just, you know, just some little cylinder goes awry, and all of a sudden the whole thing breaks down.
Are they to the point? Do you think that I'm referring to with CJ Prosise, Greg? Do you think?
I think yesterday was the first bit of evidence that they're getting there. I don't think it doesn't seem like they're there yet. And they knew what they were getting when they drafted him, because he had concussions and ankle issues from his junior year at Notre Dame. And he wasn't even healthy for the combine. He wasn't healthy all the way up in the pre-draft workouts. So they knew this. And he was hurt the very first rookie minicamp last year. So this was another bit of a dice roll, and why they got a guy that's this talented in the third round is other teams may have felt the same way. And look, I'm not going to challenge an NFL player's pain threshold or his ability to play through injury, because this is a brutality-based sport that these guys do unbelievable things with their bodies. I'm telling you, though, that they have started to reach somewhat of a point of what the heck with getting him on the field. And players will tell you, it's a cliche, and every third interview I hear it in training camp, availability is your biggest ability, and especially in preseason when it comes down to roster things. Chris Carson's emergence is not putting C.J. Prosise's roster spot in risk, but it is putting his stature on the team and dependability, and, hey, what can we use this guy with? Chris Carson's opened some eyes, and frankly, C.J. Prosise has not, because he hasn't been on the field.
All right, thank you, Greg. It's great stuff as always. Greg Bell every day at 7, Seahawks at 7. Greg Bell, Seahawks Insider for the Tacoma News Tribune. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. Make sure you read his stuff online and then paper. We'll see you at 9:28, 9:30 this morning. Thank you, Greg.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys.
It's just, you know, and this is so easy for people like me to sit here in front of a table when I'm not involved in it to say. But real quickly, before we get to the Daily Schnoz and get to 2 more training camps and more fantasy football advice, Hugh, it would just be a huge part of my exploration before I draft guys, before I sign guys. I know that John Schneider does a complete job. He does it as well as anybody, so I'm not taking anything away from him. But if I were in that position, I'm sure he does this. When I'm exploring a guy and I'm calling coaches and coordinators in college to find out, there would be a question I'd always ask everybody about a guy that I was thinking about drafting, and that is, do you sense that this player, whoever it is willing to play through some nagging, not serious? Does he really want to be out there? Or do you get the sense that this player is needs to feel really, really almost close to perfect, or he'll pull himself out. I want to know that about this. This can't be a new thing in the NFL with players. A player who's like that has had to have been like that in college and has a reputation, has to have had kind of a trail behind him, has left a trail behind him as a guy who I'm not sure how much he wants to be on the playing field.
Every person in that personnel department would bristle and scoff and reprimand us if we didn't clearly and unequivocally acknowledge that that is absolutely a vital question that they consider. Now, in the end, if they end up making a determination they're willing to take on the risk, but you can better believe they know about a guy's temperament. If anybody they draft, 7th round, let alone 2nd round, they're going to know if a running back, a converted wide receiver that playing at Notre Dame major college football, that who's now a halfback. So you already have one red flag that goes up. Okay, can he handle the rigors? I'm sorry, there's some tough receivers out there. The rigors for a running back, it's blows away the rigors for a wide receiver physically. They're not even in the same ballpark. So if you're considering drafting a guy who had been had a position shift, you can better believe that question was asked. And whatever they came up with, there's other compensating factors. It's like for the offensive line, they're considering a bunch of factors, and they value toughness more than other clubs, and they're willing to give a little bit on athleticism because they value toughness. So everybody has their values. They all want the big, strong, tough guys who are burning competitors, great leaders, accountable, squeaky clean off and durable. I mean, all of those factors. Everybody wants it, but then you say, well, what if you don't get one of those factors? Are you willing to give on size? Are you willing to draft a dummy? Are you willing to draft a guy, who's had a DWI? I mean, everybody is going to say, well, we'll fudge on this, but it's a value statement. So, you get C.J. Procyse because you like the upside.
All right. Well, the upside looks great standing in civilian clothes on the bench. Anyway, Daily Schnoz, 2 more training camps to cover, more fantasy advice. If you're getting ready to draft in the next couple of weeks a brand new fantasy team, you want to be listening to the Schnoz, because everywhere we go, we ask the fantasy questions of the morning. Who should we have? Who are the sleepers? And nobody knows this stuff quite like the people that cover these camps. 722, Daily Schnoz, 2 training camps next, and then the Heritage Distilling text line. All right, Daily Schnoz at 28 minutes past the hour. We're going to go to 2 more training camps, find out the storylines surrounding the training camps, and before we end with each one, we'll give you some fantasy advice for those of you that are drafting fantasy teams over the next couple of weeks. We start in Washington, D.C., with Jeff Bezos' favorite employee in the world, and that would be Jerry Brewer, columnist of the Washington Post. Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning, Mitch. Do you think it's too soon for me to ask Bezos for about $10 million of that $80 billion he has?
$10 million is all you're going to ask for? What's the matter with you?
It's a very small numbers percentage-wise. I can be bought easily.
It's in the couch, for God's sakes. You're better off. It is in the couch cushions. You're better off going and buying a lottery ticket tonight for about $750 million. Am I reading right? Are there offensive question marks and concerns around this offense that's led by Kirk Cousins, or am I not reading this correctly?
Yeah, you're reading it correctly, but the big thing that you have to stick in front of that is that Jordan Reed was on the PUP list with a toe injury, and today will be the first day that he's practiced with the team. So he is their best wide receiver. So you want to see what it's like when he's in there. But right now, I mean, Kirk Cousins and Terrell Pryor are not on the same page. They can't run the ball. There's some issues there. You kind of forget with this team that they lost 2,000-yard receivers in Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson. They replaced them with one raw 1,000-yard receiver in Terrell Pryor, so there's going to be some adjusting.
What kind of team defensively are the Washington Redskins, who have to face, Dak Prescott? I don't know if they have to face Zeke Elliott more than once, but They got to go to, face Eli Manning a couple of times and I would guess an improving, blossoming Philadelphia Eagles offense with their young quarterback. The Redskins got what it takes on the defensive side of the football, Jerry.
Well, Mitch, they finished 28th in the league the last 2 years in total defense.
Right.
And they've just been bad in a lot of different ways. Missed tackles, big plays. Can't really do anything right. I think they'll be better than one of the 5 worst defenses in the NFL. But if you expect them to be imposing or a challenge for any of these guys, I'm not sure. I think one thing they'll do better defensively this year is they will leverage the talent of Josh Norman. That's one of the big reasons that Joe Barry, the former defensive coordinator, got fired, is Josh Norman came here and he didn't even know how to use him. So I think at least this year, I think you'll see Josh Norman reemerge as one of the top 5 corners in the league.
Will Kirk Cousins continue to play in the second half of the season if the Redskins are kind of out of it and the organization is considering life after Cousins?
I think that's a big question. I don't see what the value would be if they don't want to re-sign him and let's say you're 3-6 at some point in the year and you've got to figure out a plan B. Why not hand it over and give some reps to Colt McCoy or to Nate Sudfeld? Obviously, if they lost Cousins, they would likely draft a guy, but I think there will be a big clamoring if they're no good this year, and especially if the offense is not imposing, to just go ahead and move on, because that'll be the ultimate sign that Cousins is not coming back.
Third best of the NFC East, Jerry?
It's a battle. Mitch, I go back and forth every day. Like, who's better, Philadelphia or Washington? And they play in the first game of the season here. And you know what? I mean, I honestly think Philadelphia has more going for it. And here's the thing. I think the NFC is back to the point where it's either the best division or one of the 2 or 3 best divisions in football. And all these teams think they're going to go 9-7 at worst, but somebody's got to win 5 or 6 games. And I think Washington's been very complacent in the preseason, which is not a good thing if you're a team that is trying to get to the next level. So right now I would put them in last in the NFC.
Okay. And before you go, for our fantasy footballers out there, give us the guys that we want, the skill position guys. Do we want Cousins on our team as a starting quarterback, as a backup? What skill position guys do we want? And maybe somebody or two that's off the radar that late in the draft may be worth, drafting and stowing on your bench until he starts performing.
I think you can feel pretty safe with Cousins as a middle or lower end option as a starting quarterback. You know what he's going to give you. His numbers are going to be very efficient, and he's not going to throw a ton of picks. He'll just
unless they sit him down, right? If they sit him down, you're screwed, right?
I still think more likely than not, Jay Gruden is gonna have the influence and be able to ride it out for him to make 16 starts. Cousins never gets injured, never gets hit. He's very smart, so I think that's safe. Okay. I expect a big year from Terrell Pryor. And Terrell Pryor.
What's a big year?
His money.
What's a big year, Jerry?
I could see him 11 or 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns.
Okay.
I think that Jordan Reed will be their leading receiver.
Okay.
So maybe 80-something catches, 900-something yards.
Okay.
And he'd have an outside chance at catching 10 touchdowns, which is very good for a tight end. I think the big sleeper is the littlest guy on the field, and that's Jamison Crowder. I think he's someone who was on pace very quietly to get 1,000 receiving yards, and then at the end of the year, they just kept giving the ball to Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson a year ago. But he's very reliable. Kirk Cousins is looking for him at all times. So if there's someone who's going to break free and have just an unexpectedly big year, it's Jamison Crowder.
Great to hear your voice, Jerry. I hope you're good. We'll talk soon, okay?
Anytime, man. Take care.
All right. 7:35. Great stuff from Jerry Brewer on the Redskins, where they fit in the NFC East, and their fantasy football options. Another training camp covered with lots of fantasy football options next in 30 seconds on 950 KJR.
Finding great candidates to hire can be, well, like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. which is why you should try ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter is different. It doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them. With its powerful technology, ZipRecruiter distributes your job everywhere it needs to be to find the right candidates. In fact, over 80% of jobs on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just one day. So, while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, only ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
Used by businesses of all sizes, ZipRecruiter offers the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now you can try ZipRecruiter free. That's right, free. Just click the banner or go to ZipRecruiter.com/iHeart. That's ZipRecruiter.com/iHeart for your free trial. ZipRecruiter.com/iHeart.
Development. The daily schnoz.
All right, our next stop is the New England area, the Boston area, the Patriots, Foxborough, Patriots training camp. Where is Patriots training camp, Paul? Is it right at the facility there in Foxborough or somewhere else?
No, it's right in Foxborough, right at Gillette Stadium. Ever since they built the new place, since I think 2003, we've been right here. So one-stop shopping.
Hey, Paul, we do this every morning where we ask different people who cover training camps from around the NFL, and we're going to cover them all, to come on with us two a morning. I don't recall any one of them answering the question, what are the big storylines, with the response of, can they go undefeated the entire season? I got a funny feeling you're actually going to tell me one of the storylines is people speculating whether this team is capable of going 16-0.
Yeah, it absolutely has been, and much different than in 2007 when they actually did go undefeated in the regular season. There wasn't really any talk about that prior to that season. They had made a lot of moves similar to this year in the offseason. They brought in Randy Moss and Wes Welker. Adalys Thomas was one of the highest priced free agent contracts that they brought in on defense. Much like Stephon Gilmore. But, yeah, there has been a lot of talk. I promise I won't tell Bill Belichick that you're asking me about that, because he doesn't seem to take too kindly to those questions. But, I have been one that's sort of thrown it out there. And I understand how difficult it is, and I understand that it's probably not going to happen. They're probably going to lose a game or two or, who knows, 4 along the way, just because you just never know what's going to happen in the NFL. But the team is talented enough to do it. And they will be favored, I think, in every game. I know that some of those, the bookmakers already have lines for every week, and they'll be favored in pretty much every game they play.
Wow.
Whether it happens, like I said, I don't think it will happen. I just think there's too many things that happen. You look back at 2007, they could have easily lost 4 games that year. They just got a lot of lucky breaks down the stretch of games and found a way to win.
Right. Did they ever trade the Super Bowl hero cornerback against the Seahawks from a few years ago that they were talking about trading during the offseason after they acquired Gilmore, or do they still have him?
No, they still have Malcolm Butler. He's still very much a part of what they're doing here in New England, and I think that's probably one of the biggest strengths of the team and one of the biggest improvements over last year. I think Gilmore is much better than Logan Ryan, who was their number 2 corner a year ago. The number 3 guy is Eric Rowe, who they acquired around this time last year, a little bit later than this actually, last year. So he was, sort of fighting to get his feet wet as the 3rd guy. I think he's much more experienced in the system now. So they like the secondary. They like Devin McCourty at the back end with Patrick Chung. So that part of the defense they like. Where they do have some questions is up front. And the defensive end spot in particular, I think, is pretty thin. They lost their top pick, was a 3rd rounder, a guy named Derek Rivers. He looks like he's going to be out for the year with a torn ACL. So they're a little thin at that spot. But overall, I think they really like the situation they have with Gilmore and Butler.
Hey, Paul, segue into some fantasy advice for our listeners. LeGarrette Blount's gone. Who gets his carries? Who gets his yards? Who gets his touchdowns?
Yeah, that's what makes it a little bit difficult to forecast, and I'm not a huge fantasy player, but the way the Patriots change things from week to week, you never really know. My guess would be Mike Gillislee will be the guy who gets the majority of the carries, and I think certainly the majority of the goal line carries. I think he looks like he has a nose for the end zone. I think he had 11 career touchdowns in part-time work in his couple of years in Buffalo behind LaShawn McCoy. The problem with him is he's been dealing with a hamstring problem. We haven't seen him in the preseason yet. He is back on the practice field now. He was a full go yesterday at practice. So I would think that he would get the first crack at goal line carries to try to replace that. that LeGarrette Blount role. But I would not be surprised, guys, if you see it sort of divided a little bit more evenly with a guy like Rex Burkhead, who has flashed a little bit in camp, with Gillislee. And if Dion Lewis stays around, I think they have a very deep backfield with guys that all could get goal line carries. But Gillislee would be my top one, and then you have to go from there with guys who catch the ball a little bit better out of the backfield.
20 seconds left. Outside of Brady and Gronk, who do we want? What skill position players do we want on our team?
Oh, I mean, you got to stop and end with those two guys.
That's it.
But I'll give you 20 seconds. Brandon Cooks, I think, is going to be absolutely electric for this offense.
Give me how many yards, how many touchdowns?
Well, I think he's going to be 12 or 1,300 yards, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's knocking on the door of 8 or 10 touchdowns.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a huge fantasy guy. Don't hold me to that, guys,
Okay.
but he looks electric in camp.
Okay. Paul, thanks very much.
All
Thanks
right,
for
guys.
putting up with us. Patriots Football Weekly and PFW TV. I can hear him snickering over the Fantasy Football League questions. How about that? How about Brandon Cooks? Forgot about him. New Orleans, Drew Brees. He goes, think about if Brandon Cooks plays the rest of his career in New England. I don't know that he will or he won't. But think about the career that Brandon Cooks had in terms of what quarterbacks he has drawn in his NFL career. He gets Brees during some 5,000-yard seasons, and then he graduates from Brees to Tom Brady throwing the football in New England. That's not half bad for a little. Isn't he the Oregon State? Isn't he an Oregon State guy, Brandon Cooks?
Product, yeah. And when you look at Brady, he's had so few just real primetime targets at the receiver position in 2007 when he had Randy Moss. Remember now, that was Randy Moss coming off Oakland, not Minnesota.
Right.
And Randy Moss had 23 touchdowns.
Right. You consider Brandon Cooks a premier wide receiver?
I think he's
close.
One of the better ones that
they've had.
Brady's had for a while. But no, I mean, he's not. He's not in the AJ Green, Julio Jones.
7:42 on. He's a little guy. 7:42 on 950 KJR. There's your daily schnoz. There's 2 more training camps for you.
That's the news. I'm out of here. The Daily Schnoz, brought to you by Michael's Toyota.
All right.
Bellevue.
You know what I haven't done yet today? We've already gone an hour and 42 minutes, and we're getting ready to take your phones and your texts at the Heritage Distilling text line 49451. Dear show, .. Dear you, .. Anything that's on your mind we want to hear. I haven't given you the poll question yet today that you've got to consider, that Hugh has to consider, that Dick Fain has to consider, that Jackson Feltz pinch hitting for Slickhawk has to consider. Here's the question, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in our next segment, of course, at 8:30 when we take the phone calls for the 50-yard line seats for the Cardinals Seahawks. Here's the question. If the season started today, which it doesn't and it's stupid to even talk about, if the season started today, not ended today, if the season started today, how would you like to see the carries distributed on a percentage basis for the Seattle Seahawks? You got all the guys. Lacey, Rawls, Carson, Collins, Procise. You play Darrell Bevel and distribute it on a percentage basis. How would you like to see those 26 carries a game distributed amongst those 4, 5, 6 guys? Davis, you tell me. You can give whatever percentage to each guy that you'd like. And that's the poll question for today. Play Darrell Bevel, offensive coordinator. Dear show, .. Your answers to that and more at 49451. Coming up. Letters. Oh, we get letters. We get your letters. All right, from the VMAC. By the way, we are 10 minutes away from Hugh's Got Something to Say. Yesterday, as I recall, in our last episode of Hugh's Got Something to Say, he was exasperated about the way coaches can't find a way to both embrace and use the preseason polls as a good thing and as an inspiring thing and still get the best out of his players. All these coaches that say it doesn't matter and won't be warm and fuzzy about the preseason polls. The double talk of college football coaches was our topic yesterday as it relates to the college football poll.
When you Twitter what your ranking is immediately, and it's the first page on the
and then the coach
website,
rags on it.
But then it said, no, this doesn't mean anything to us. And I said, you know what? If you're a really good
make
program,
up your mind.
find a way. find a way to just say, you know what, we love being highly ranked because it's a statement about where our program is.
That was our episode of Hughes Got Something to Say yesterday. We have none of us have absolutely any idea where he's headed at 8 o'clock today. But before we do that, read some of the text, please.
All right, we're not going to give our opinions first. We're going to go text.
No, the
first.
Opinions go at 8:28 there.
Gotcha.
Dick Fane.
Gotcha.
Listen to the show; it's catching on.
Yes, sir. Dear show, if the season started today and it doesn't, and it's stupid to even talk about. Sorry, Hugh, Rawls 70%, Lacey 20%, 10% to other specialty roles.
Okay.
Dear Hugh, is Nick Saban the closest thing to Don James in the current college football head coaching ranks?
Well, he comes from the Don James
the tree,
right? The shadow of he was on the tree.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of aspects of Don James in Saban, and Saban has said that Don James is the reason he got in the profession and his inspiration in many ways. I think Saban has a kind of a prickly, obstinate manner that you didn't see. I know DJ had some times where he wasn't exactly cozy with the media and what have you. I would say there's some Saban. I'd say there's some Urban Meyer.
Okay.
Just a tough, no nonsense, accountable program. But I think that on the whole, given every interpersonal communication and public communication, I think Don James was more respectful to people in his communication. Not to say that there weren't some incidents, but he was a highly respected man in many, many circles.
Go ahead.
Dear show, 60% Rawls, 20% Carson, 20% Procise, 0% Lacey. The reason? Rest Lacey until Rawls gets hurt, so he's ready to go until he gets hurt, then 50-50 between Carson and Procise. That might be the most realistic situation.
That may be the most intelligent text we've ever received, is what that is.
But if Lacey's sitting around waiting for his carry,
a lot of
what's he going to be doing while he's
how much
waiting?
he's going to weigh when he gets that?
A lot of donuts floating around that sideline.
Yeah. Next.
CJ Procise needs to eat some avocado ice cream so that he will be able to play on Friday.
Okay.
Dear show, Rawls 50, Lacey 20, Procise Collins split the remainder, roughly 15%.
God, do you have 4 guys carrying the ball in a given game? I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Okay, next.
Dear show, why don't the Seahawks just trade Jimmy Graham for Joe Thomas?
Or Max Unger.
Because Jimmy Graham is exactly what the Cleveland Browns want.
Yeah, exactly.
They want a tight end when they're a 4-12 football team instead of a starting left tackle. Yeah, who wants to be there and who's been maybe the greatest player in the history of the franchise since it came back to Cleveland. Next.
Dear Hugh, on a related note, if the Hawks were to trade for Joe Thomas, what would they realistically have to give up?
Oh, boy, I'd have to think that through. Probably a second round. I don't know. I don't think it would take a first rounder at this point.
You mean during this part of the season? I would think it'd take a first round.
First round?
I don't think any team before their first game is trading their all-pro left tackle with a fan base. Any team with a fan base at this stage of the year. In fact, I don't even know that you could trade for him. You'd have to give him a king's rant. I know you're going to say, Mitch, there's always a price. Is it the whole franchise? Is it Paul Allen's money? I mean, I don't know what it is. But Hugh's got something to say.
Probably a first round.
Hugh's got something to say, and they should have done it years ago, and we could have just been off with it already. We could have had Super Bowls and all kinds of fun. 7:55. Hugh's got something to say next on 950 KJR. Plus, your chance to win 50-yard line seats to see the Seahawks and Cardinals on December the 31st. Every day at the VMAC, every day in the studio, every day in the lead up to the football season, Hugh's got something to say at 8 o'clock, and we love it. It's my favorite segment of the entire morning, and I kid you not about that. We don't have any idea. He doesn't tell us beforehand. We have no idea the topic. It could be about the good Lord above sending an eclipse our way as a wink. It could be the double talk of college football coaches about AP polls. It could be Jermaine Affetti. It could be Jermaine. He just doesn't like Jermaines. He's not Jermaine to the Seattle Seahawks when he comes to the Hughes. He's got something to say. and we're going to hear from him here in a second. Don't forget, at the bottom of the hour, your chance to win 50-yard line seats to see the Cardinals and Seahawks on December the 31st. The very best seats in the house by participating on our phone poll question of the morning, which is, and I thank Dick Fain and Jackson Feltz for this, how would you distribute right now, if the season not ended today, if the season started today, which it doesn't, it's super even talk about, how would you pass out, how would you hand out, how would you dole out the carries for the running backs that are in Seahawks in a Seahawks uniform right now in percentages? All right, M's lose to the Braves 4-0. Seesaw back to 1 game over 500, 2 back of the wild card. Minnesota Twins, Angels, and Royals in between. 35 games to go. Tony Zick's the latest on the DL. Tom Cable says that either Reese Odiambo or newly acquired Matt Tobin, which is ridiculous, will be the starting left tackle for the Seahawks in a couple of weeks when they open up the season in Green Bay. Although Greg Bell on the Seahawks at 7 still thinks that it could be Luke Jokel. It will not be Ethan Posick, apparently. Ratings for the first 2 preseason games up substantially from this time last year. Hard to judge from number 1 because it was an afternoon game versus an evening game. But number 2s, both number 2s, game number 2s of the preseason were against the Minnesota Vikings here, I think on a Friday night. And this year's was up 17% from last year's. Kyrie Irving shipped to the Celtics. Package that includes Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, and a first-round draft choice unprotected that originally was in Brooklyn. That could be Michael Porter Jr., by the way. Sources telling ESPN that Odell Beckham Jr. could miss a game or 2 into the regular season with an ankle sprain, suffered on Monday night in Cleveland. Steelers holdout Le'Veon Bell, the running back, suggests strongly in a tweet that he will return to the club on September the 1st, the day after the final preseason game. And out of Minneapolis today, Andrew Wiggins has filed the paperwork to terminate his relationship with the biggest NBA agent that there is, Bill Duffy. All of this after Duffy negotiated a 5-year, $148 million max deal, and Wiggins has yet to sign, but first he wants to terminate his agent to probably avoid paying 4% of $148 million. You do the math on that. And NFL Players President Eric Winston, I think irresponsible to say the least in his comments about an upcoming work stoppage perhaps in 2021 after the expiration of the collective bargaining agreement, when asked whether a work stoppage in 21 in the NFL could be doom and gloom for football. Could football go away, NFL football go away? His answer was, I don't care. He's the NFLPA president. His answer was, I don't care. I'm not going to be around in 20 years playing football anyway, and I don't think any of us really care whether football goes away or not. That doesn't seem like the words of a guy representing the entirety of NFL players. And with that, Jackson, I want to know when a place kicker is having a good training camp, Jackson.
You want to know when the kicker's kicking really good? When he's banging the cameraman at training camp.
Really good?
Really well. I know we've gone through this. That's the part that pissed me off.
You know what's funny about that? There's something funny about this.
What's the German part, though? This is my segment. I get the German stuff
I don't
out
know.
of there.
I don't know. That's a Slick Hawk thing. I have nothing to do with that. You know what's kind of funny is
keep the Led Zeppelin. Get the German stuff out.
That's the lead in.
Song, the beginning of the song. I got something to say. It's the beginning of the song where he says he got something to say.
Oh, well, there's your answer. There's a very reasonable
answer.
I was never the guy who said it should be called, I got something to say.
Well, that's the name of the segment, right?
All right. That's the name of the segment. So listen, what's interesting about this is we lead the segment off every morning with you saying, you know when a kicker's doing good?
Yeah.
It's when he bangs.
I told you what I don't like about that.
Yeah, but you know what you don't even realize about that? That had nothing to do with you've got something to say. That never came from you. You didn't say that. You didn't say that during the Hughes Got Something to Say segment. You said that in a completely unrelated rant and segment, and we've now made that into Hughes Got Something to Say. So people driving around said, hey, on one of the Hughes Got Something to Say segments, he went off on the kicker.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't.
I didn't.
You didn't.
No.
You never used that as Hughes Got Something to say. Something else. Yeah, but we think it sounds good to lead off Hughes. What is on your – I want to know. People want to know.
No.
I want to know.
Okay, you want to know?
I want to know. What are you thinking about this morning?
So as we watch the preseason, and we have been debating the question of whether or not it's more important to have the starters play well, or how much are we watching the depth and what have you. There's some interesting, in my mind, facts that take hold of that discussion. And one of them, Mitch, is that if you take the average money paid to just starters in the NFL, the average salary of $159.8 for Seattle is number one in the NFL.
$159.8 million a year? In this season.
In this season. So
okay.
starters, the Seattle Seahawks starting unit is making more than any other starting unit, and as in terms of cap dollars at $135. They also have the highest cap value. So that obviously speaks to, the depth. You're not paying your depth as much. You're paying the starters the greater percentage. And yet, as we consider the roster and the long-term, I'm kind of thinking long-term, that there's a model up there that John Schneider has about roster construction. And I think it's interesting to note, we think of the Seahawks, these young guys. Guess what? They're the fourth oldest team in the NFL.
Is that right?
Yeah, yep.
Based on the starting line?
On the starters, yep.
Okay.
They're starters.
Okay.
Only the Arizona Cardinals, the Carolina Panthers, and the Baltimore Ravens are older.
Really?
Yes. So they're the fourth oldest, the starters.
Yeah.
They're being paid the most in terms of average salary and in terms of cap hit, and just kind of looking.
Well, those go hand in hand, right? Being the highest or the fourth highest, and being one of the oldest, or being the highest and being one of the oldest, goes hand in hand, because the older the older the players are that typically are manning these starting positions, the more money they're getting paid, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In a general sense, I'm sure there's a little bit of
wiggle room in that, but it's close.
There's
certainly a correlation. But okay, all right, okay.
And so I would just say that as the team is looking at their model with this aging team. Well, I don't know.
I remember they used to be young. Remember when we used to be young?
They used to be young.
We all used to be young.
Yeah, and now they're the fourth oldest starting unit. And they're getting paid the starters.
Windows closing.
Yeah, and just looking at the roster construction, next year the prominent free agents, Jimmy Graham foremost among them, Luke Jokel. Now this is just in terms of the money that they're being paid. Eddie Lacy and Bradley McDougald. The following year, and this is kind of really my point in this, that it feels like this iteration of the Seattle Seahawks, as we view them in their construction,
right?
They've got 2 more years. Because Richard Sherman is a unrestricted free agent after 18. He's got 2 more seasons.
2 more years.
Okay. Earl Thomas, unrestricted free agent after 18.
Yeah.
He's got 2 more years.
Right.
KJ Wright, unrestricted free agent after the next 2 years.
Right.
Cliff Averill, unrestricted free agent. So now you do have Russell Wilson for another year after that, and Bobby Wagner for another year after that. But getting back to all the players that you're going to potentially lose if you don't re-up them.
And let me toss a little dab of spice into what you're saying. Who's the oldest coach in the NFL?
Pete Carroll. Yeah.
2 years from now, if he's still coaching, who will be the oldest coach in the NFL? Pete Carroll. Now
it's possible that somebody could be hired.
No, it's not. It's possible. Not going to happen. Ageless. Now he's the ageless wonder.
Ageless, yes.
But you could even tie him into this. You could even close your eyes and say, well, if they start breaking it up and starting from scratch, that maybe Pete Carroll 2 years from now would say, I've had enough. It's time to give somebody else. So there's a great visual a great snapshot of this. It's a two-year situation right now.
Yeah. How many times as parents have we been advise from parents that have a little bit older kids. Their kids are graduating from high school.
Enjoy it now.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Just blink.
Yeah.
They're going to be gone. You can't believe how fast they're out of the house.
Yes.
Right? And so for the Seattle Seahawks, we've watched these guys grow up. We feel like, we feel like they're young.
Can't
they're
believe
not
that
so
they're
young.
not so young anymore.
They're not so young. They're old, and they're getting paid a ton of dough. And within a couple of years, these guys, presumably, there's going to have to be some hard goodbyes. So as we watch preseason, and we're talking about this depth, and when the Seahawks were at their best, remember in 2013, Pete Carroll, I'm looking at the game notes for the game. He has a remarkable record in the preseason. I'll have to locate it. But, every year, and when they were at their best, they were slaughtering people in the second half because they had great depth. And it looks like their depth has been increased. But I feel like the importance of their depth is increasing because of the fact
that they're not paying them.
Well,
they're not paying their depth. And you're telling me the importance of their depth. Those two things things collide in my mind.
Well, yeah, but you got to have young guys. You got to have guys in their
minimum
first contract. Yep.
Minimum salary
guys.
Guys.
Have guys in their first contract. Yeah.
Doesn't help that your first-round draft choice, there's some wondering whether he's ever going to play it down in the National Football League.
Yeah, no.
I guess I shouldn't say first-round draft choice. Your first choice overall, it doesn't help that he's back in Michigan with, some people are whispering, major head injuries that could cost him his NFL career, that you have just literally, it's possible they took the first-round draft choice. It's possible, Hugh,
yes,
that they just decided it would be the same as them coming up on the board. Now, I keep saying first-round draft choice. Whatever. They're flushing it down the toilet. And just saying when Roger Goodell says the Seahawks are on the clock, them just yelling from the little table with the phone, with the helmet phone, hey, commish, we're not going to pick.
Yeah, not pass.
We're just not pass. We're just not going to pick
you
one.
Can come back.
We don't want anybody. We're going to pass. We'll see you next round, commish.
That would be jumping to a conclusion that I think would be, to say that his career's over. It appears as 2017 is in
well,
great
let me
jeopardy.
challenge you on that. Okay, if I were to take a step back and say his career's over is maybe too strong of a comment. If I said either his career's over or his career will be negatively impacted, he'll never be the player. If he has let me ask you this. If he's got a head injury, a brain injury that costs him, let's say it costs him this regular season, the entire season he can't play. The doctors already have told them. Let's say the doctors have already told him he can't play.
Yeah.
If it's that serious that he can't play a whole season and they know that now, then you can't tell me that it's unreasonable for me to say that's an injury that maybe he'll play, but he'll never be the same guy on the football field. It's possible he'll never be whatever player he was going to be. He'll never be that player on the football field.
To me, I've always felt the degree to which we should be concerned about any unwanted event is the product of two factors: the probability times the magnitude. Okay, so if you're an ardent Seahawks fan, we can talk about the probability. Let's say that the probability is what do you want to say? Can you tell me a probability that it's going to impact his career or foil his career altogether?
I think it's better than 50-50.
Really?
Yes. If you're asking me what I think the chances are of him either not ever playing or B, playing but never being the same guy.
Because of the injury.
I think it's better than 50-50.
Okay.
Better than 50-50.
I think that probability sounds high. No, you're speculating, I'm speculating. Mitch, you may be exactly right. But if that's the case, then yeah, you're right. Now, probability times magnitude. Okay, magnitude, you just spent a second-round pick on a guy that isn't going to help you. Well, the magnitude then, magnitude we talk about, I have a dear friend who just had a tumor removed from his brain yesterday, and I've been doing a lot of praying for him. So when you start talking about magnitude with me right now, I'm not in a mood to talk about Malik McDowell, the magnitude. But if you're a Seahawks fan, Yeah, that can have high impact. That's high magnitude if a guy like Malik McDowell can't play. And it underscores when we're going through. To me, there's a little bit of a connection, Mitch, with if you want to bring up Malik McDowell and that issue and how Seattle's getting older, and there has to be an influx of young guys in first contracts. You've got to get performance from guys in their first contract. McDowell certainly would have been a guy that you would point to.
Would be the guy you would point to.
And as we've just stumbled
Frank
on this,
Clark.
what appears to be a crisis state of the offensive tackles.
Yeah.
There was a big discussion about Cam Robinson, the Outland Trophy winner, playing in the SEC, and the number one game I scouted all through the pre-draft was when he went against Myles Garrett, and he kicked the dog meat out of Myles Garrett, the number one overall pick. I mean, he said, you know what? You want to lay that stallion up against me? I'm going to 3 hours from now, you ask him who's the better man. Cam Robinson had a Steve Hutchinson mentality about that game, and he put it to him. Myles Garrett tapped out. You watch the tape. He tapped out. And so, he's a left tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and amidst not having McDowell and amidst the tackle problems we're having and all the discussion about what's the philosophy of drafting linemen? Do you just want to have these jack of all trades? Hey, we watch him play center, but he can play tackle.
Master of none.
Here's a guy that was the Outland Trophy playing offensive tackle, and you desperately need a tackle, and the pick you could have had. Now, he's in Jacksonville. Maybe great players go to die in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I don't know what type of season he's going to have at that and with that club, but
right.
A lot of things to think about as these young guys are going to be asked to replace the old guys.
Well, a tangential thought to your 2-year window, and Hugh Millen has given you Hugh's got something to say. We'll take your phone calls on the poll question, give you a chance to win 50-yard line seats to the Seahawks and Cardinals. A tangential thought on the 2-year window and all these guys and their contracts. They're all kind of tied into one another. Some people might be driving around saying, well, yeah, Earl's a free agent, Richard's a free agent. They'll maybe be able to sign one back, and one's going to go. This guy's going to be older. This guy, Cam Chancellor's going to be older. It seems KJ Wright, it seems to me that it's almost an all or none. Yeah, let's say you want to have Richard Sherman back. Let's use Earl Thomas as he's probably a better example in my mind. And you're not going to get Earl Thomas. You're losing Earl Thomas. You're losing KJ Wright. You're losing Cam Chancellor one way or the other. At that point, do you want Earl Thomas back? There's going to be an outlook and a plan, a skeleton plan for how this team's going to be in the future. And maybe Earl Thomas is the greatest safety in the NFL 2 years from today. He's still the greatest safety, but he will be a certain age. And if everybody around him goes, then it may make more business sense for whoever's, constructing this team like John Schneider to say, you know what, it doesn't make sense for us because Earl Thomas here with a bunch of new young guys in a rebuilding mode. Why do we want Earl Thomas here?
Why did they draft 3 safeties? Because I think they're already thinking this through. That's why I say, enjoy your kids because they're going to be leaving for college.
Well, you waited till their senior year in high school to tell us. Why did you tell me this when my kids were in grade school, for God's sake? Why are you telling me with like a half a minute left in their high school careers?
They're sophomores. They're going into their junior year. But contract-wise, again, Russell, you got 3 more years. But Sherman, 2, and he's the second highest paid player on the team at 13.2. Michael Bennett, 3rd highest paid. Now, you have him for another 4 years counting here, but who expects him to be here?
Not going to be.
He's not going to be here. And then lastly, Earl Thomas is the 4th highest paid.
This is depressing. This is depressing. You want to know why? Because you're telling me to enjoy my kids for the next 2 years, and my kids fail in science class because of Reese Odiambo, and he's already got an F, and I'm trying to enjoy him. I'm trying to enjoy him, but he's failing. He's effing failing a class. He may not get his high school degree.
Some kid is shooting spit wads at him, and
yeah,
and
it's Reese Odiombo and Matt
in the
Tobin.
Forehead,
yeah,
and they can't focus.
Oh God! All right, thanks for that, Hugh. Hugh's got something to say. Enjoy your kids because it's 2 years, and they're all gonna fly the coop, and you're going to send some of them away too. Not only are some of them going to fly the coop,
but I think also in the preseason, as we watch these young guys play in the second half,
it's important. Yeah, they're the future.
Who's going to emerge and give this team contribution in their first contract?
All right, that's Hugh's got something to say. 286-9595 or the number that nobody remembers, 1-800-829-0950. Everybody who calls now and answers the question, how would you divvy up the carries if the season started today amongst the running backs that you've seen in the preseason? We want your answers to that question. We'll give you a chance to win the 50-yard line seats to the final game of the regular season between the Cardinals and Seahawks next on 950 KJR. All right, 29 minutes after the hour, we're taking your phone calls and giving you a chance to win 50-yard line seats to see the Seahawks and the Cardinals play. It'll be Game 16. The best seats in the house. All you got to do is call now to get your name in the hat. It's actually your number that goes into the hat. 206-286-9595 or 1-800-829-0950. That's the number that nobody remembers. According to Jackson Phelps, nobody wants the tickets. Nobody wants the 50-yard line seats because we have open lines at 1-800-829-0950. All you got to do is call and just be a Seahawks, if you're a Seahawks fan, and share with us an opinion on the following question. We always say, if the season ended today, which it doesn't and it's stupid to even talk about. Sorry, Hugh. Today we're going to say, if the season started today, which it doesn't and it's stupid to even talk about. We want you to hand out the carries on a percentage basis. Who do you want to see get the carries? If tonight were the season opener in Green Bay, based on what you know, based on what you've seen, 206-286-9595, 1-800-829-0950. We want you to tell us who you would give the ball to. Let's say there's 25 or 26 carries. You do it in a percentage basis. And I got 6, from what I can remember, 6 running back possibilities. Yeah. I got guys named, not necessarily in this order. In fact, I'll go over Davis, Collins, Procise, Carson, Rawls, Lacey. Who am I forgetting? Am I forgetting anybody?
Well, Davis.
I said Davis first. He was the first guy I said. Davis, Collins, Procise, Carson, Rawls, and Lacey. You can divvy them up any way you would like.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Catastrophe happening. Hope he's going to – this is not good. Catastrophe about to happen. Anyway, you can divvy them up. You can divvy them up any way that you'd like. Let's go around the horn before we get to the phone calls. Anybody who participates goes into the drawing for the 50-yard line seats to see the Seahawks and the Cardinals. Dick Fain, we'll start with you.
Well,
Dick?
First we got to come up with an accurate number because last 3 years, 2014, 15, and 16, their carries have gone from, this is just running back carries, 390 down to 360 down to 290. So your number of 26 a game is actually 416.
Okay, but it doesn't matter if we're doing it in percentages, right?
No, but I want to take a look at carries per game.
What the total number of carries are per game is irrelevant if I'm asking to just divvy them out in percentages. And we're not, by the way, including Russell Wilson.
Correct.
He does not count. He does not figure in this poll. So don't give me the whole, I'd like to see 10% read options, okay? Because that doesn't work.
I just took them back to the 2015 season. I think they're going to be closer to that year than they were last year. Last year was an anomaly as far as how many carries they got. So I've got 150 carries for Rawls.
No, give me a
I'm going to give you both. Okay, relax.
I just want percentage.
42% for Rawls.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah.
33 for Lacey as he's chasing the cheeseburgers around.
Yeah.
14% for Procise, which would be 50 carries under this scenario. And then I went other, which is, the Carsons and the Davises.
I want to know who.
Carson mainly is the other.
Okay, because not everybody's going to make the team. You got to decide who's on the team.
Yeah, Carson, and either Davis or McKissick would have the other.
Who is it? You got 11%. Who is it?
Carson,
11%. Okay?
But he's not going to get all 11 of those percent because there's going to be other guys that have carries over the course of the year.
I'm just asking you who you would give the ball to
if there's
tomorrow,
just those 4.
tonight.
That's how I break it down.
All right. Jackson, go ahead.
I'm going 45% for Eddie Lacy, 40% for Thomas Rawls, 10% for CJ Prosise, and 5% for Chris Carson.
Okay. Hugh Breedlove-Millen, go ahead.
Well, first of all, just the topic got me on some numbers that I think bear mentioning. Dick kind of touched on it, but I'm just going overall rushing carries. 2012, Seattle 33.5, ranked number 1 in the NFL in terms of rushing attempts. In 2013, the Super Bowl season, 31.8 attempts, ranked number 2. In 2014, 32.8, ranked number 2. 2015, 31.3, ranked number 3. Last year, 25.2 carries, ranked number 20. So they go 1, 2, 2, 3, 20.
Those numbers don't resonate very much with me.
And that includes a running quarterback,
because
too.
I think a lot of that depends upon, are you coming from behind late and how do you do in the first 3 quarters determines whether you run the ball in the fourth quarter or whether you pass the ball in the fourth quarter. And those stats could just be a function of the Seahawks weren't as good. They were playing from behind last year more than they were playing from behind in the earlier years. But go ahead. How are you divvying up the carries?
I totally understand. Hey, do you run because you're winning or do you win because you're running?
Yeah.
But as it influences them and their desire to get back to the higher numbers.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll said, I want rush attempts plus pass completions. So it is affecting their philosophy.
Okay,
so,
how are you divvying up the carries?
Well, I in general want it to be a committee deal here. There's not one guy that really strikes me as a guy that says, well, wait a minute, he has demonstrably earned the right. So it's going to be pretty even for me. I'll start with Rawls at 30%. I'll go for the time being, I'll go Eddie Lacy at 25%.
Okay.
Okay. I want to see Chris Carson.
Okay.
I really do. I want to see him at 20%.
Okay.
Where am I at now?
You're at 55, 75%. You got 25% more.
So I'll go CJ Prosise at 20%.
Okay. That's 4 running backs. How many running backs are you going to have?
4.
All right. So now you got 5%.
McKissick.
Okay. A wide receiver hand him the ball.
I'll give 2% back to
okay.
Yeah, I'll give 1. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
going to make it easy.
To all of them, and
I'm going to do it quickly since you guys chewed up the time. I'm going to do it very quickly. I think that Lacy and Rawls, if the season started today, I want Lacy and Rawls with the same identical amount of carries in the same situations so that I can evaluate who's better. I'm going to give the ball to the guy who wins. They're going to compete against one another in game 1. So I'll say I want 40% one guy, 40% the other guy. That leaves me 20%. I want to see Carson and Prosise carry the ball in the other 20%, all right? I don't care so much about Collins and Davis. Let's go to the phone lines. Anybody who participates, anybody who gets through, goes into the drawing. 50-yard line seats. Seahawks Cardinals. Scott in Marysville. Go ahead.
Good morning, guys.
Go ahead.
I'm going Eddie Lacy with 60%.
Okay.
Thomas Rawls with 30%, and then Chris Carson with 10%.
Cameron and Napavine. Go ahead, Cameron.
Yeah, I'm going Rawls with 40%. I'm thinking Lacy 30, Prosise is 20, and then the rest I'd split up between Carson and whoever else makes the team.
All right, Jessica and Issaquah. 8:37, you're going to hear from Tom Cable on who he's going to start on the offensive line and who's out for left tackle. Jessica and Issaquah, go ahead.
Good morning. I want to see 35% Eddie Lacy, 35% Rawls, and let's split up 10 between Prosise, Davis, and Carson and see what shakes out.
Okay. So you've got Lacy and Rawls like I do competing for the featured running back role in the regular season. Greg in Federal Way.
Good morning, gentlemen. I would say 50% Thomas Rawls, 20 and 20 for Lacy and Carson, and 10% Prosise.
Okay. Pam in Issaquah, go ahead.
I don't think it's stupid to talk about, by the way, and it's kind of coming up pretty quick. I think Rawls 50%, Lacey 20%. I kind of want to save him, but keep him active and involved enough to care and lay off the cheeseburgers.
Okay.
And then 10 each, Procise, Collins, Carson.
Okay. Give me names, Jackson, please.
You got them on your text.
I don't have. Just give me names. Troy and Kirkland. Go ahead, Troy.
I think the Seahawks are going to pound the rock this year. I think Rawls is going to be 35, Lacey 35, and between Carson and Procise, I think both 15.
All right, I'm not asking for predictions here, people. I'm asking what you would do. I'm not asking what the Seahawks are going to do. I'm asking what you would do if you were Darrell Bevel and handing out the ball. Go ahead. What is it? Delton and Burien. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to go 50% for Rawls, 30% for Procise, and 20% for Lacey.
Okay. Next up, Bill in New Jersey.
Okay, I don't think it's stupid, and we'll run Lacey a lot to keep his weight down. 35% for Lacey, 30 for Rawls, 20 for Procise, 10 Carson, and 5 for Collins.
Okay, so I took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 calls, and 1, 2, 3 want Lacey to be the featured running back. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 want Rawls to be. 3 want Lacey to be the featured running back. 4 want Rawls to be the featured running back, and 1 agrees with me. Make him co-feature, give him exactly the same amount of carries, and let the better man win in the fourth quarter carries or the second game carries.
What was the highest percentage for Carson?
I didn't do the rest of it. Yeah, I didn't write all it down. Anyway, 8:40. Let's hear what Tom Cable says about who's not going to play starting left tackle for the Seattle Seahawks. It might surprise you. Next on 950 KJR. So we've talked ad nauseum about this left tackle situation with George Fant's injury. I know that there's a lot of people like Dick Fain out there who think, George Fant, I can't believe, and you've even said it, and Greg Bell has said it, I can't believe we're talking as if George Fant is like the end-all, be-all at left tackle. I think the more interesting and more the sad development of the situation is this team is so poised across the board to be a Super Bowl contending team. They have all the parts to be a Super Bowl contending team. The fact that we are 2 weeks before the regular season opener in Green Bay and we're deciding between Reese Odiombo and Matt Tobin, I'm betting that half of our audience doesn't even know the name Matt Tobin. They're saying, who? Did something happen? Yeah, in the last 48 hours, they acquired a third-string Philadelphia Eagles offensive lineman for a fifth-round draft choice.
That some people think may have been cut out.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't have any basis.
I've read articles. I've read articles in Philadelphia, and the article said he was the third. He was on the third-team offensive line. He is now got a 50-50 shot, the third stringer from the Philadelphia Eagles, of being the opening day blindside protector of your $22 million a year player, Russell Wilson. I just think I can't. But how did we get here? I mean, we've all been talking about it, but how did we get here? Reese Odiombo or Matt Tobin?
And that doesn't even mention how subpar Jermaine Ifedi has been thus far this preseason.
And you don't mention Luke Jokel. I say he's been subpar as well. We're getting to the point where Jason Lockenfor is going to join us courtesy of Zeke's Pizza here in about 11 minutes. So let's listen in, if you don't mind. Let's listen in to Tom Cable assessing the situation and starting off with just the reality that George Fant's got a long road of recovery in front of him.
It's a shame. It's football, but it's part of the game, but it's the bad part of the game. And, he done a lot. He made himself better, got himself physically ready to play, mentally grew up, started to become a football player, as you all saw, and then this happened. So it's a setback, and he'll get fixed, and he'll come back better than he was before. I think this will add to his overall perspective. But it's life, man, in this game. You don't want it, and it hurts when it happens because obviously we think we're building something, and then to lose a piece like that. But that's why we got depth and why we got who we got.
So, Tom, terrific. What are our options at left tackle?
Well, I think there's a couple of them. You've got Reese, who'll go out there on Friday. You've got kid we just traded for, Matt Tobin. You've got Luke Jokel. So I think the fact that we have three options, my wish, my want is to try and keep as much of it intact as possible. And so if anyone's saying, well, why don't they just move Jokel out there? Well, remember last year, if you just go back, 12 months, I think there was too much of that. Nothing we could really handle then, just had to be that way. But this year we have choices, and we have the opportunity to keep as much of it intact as we can, and we'll do that going forward.
Who the hell is this Matt Tobin guy, Tom?
I've studied him quite a bit, his background coming out of Iowa with Kirk Ferentz and Brian Ferentz, his line coach. There's some really good stuff there. Kid who walked on and earned it and has earned everything. So, he's got work ethic. He's probably pretty tough, fairly smart, reliable. All the things that we look for. What has he done on film? Been consistent. He's been in the league a while. When he's been asked, called on to go play, he's done a nice job.
Everybody's killing Odiombo. How do you think he did in the preseason game after the fan injury and in training camp and in practices?
Just that. I think we all look at things, at least in this program, that when something like this happens, it's an opportunity for someone else, opportunity to get someone else ready to do it. And so it's just that. It's just a really cool opportunity, and he's ready for it. So, we wouldn't do it unless we kind of felt that way. So kind of excited for him.
And, by the way, there are other positions along the offensive line that are in flux, like the right guard position, Tom. Terrific.
Mark was a little rough the first week. He was better last week, and it was just the opposite. So, here we are flipping a coin on Friday night, and they're both after it. They're both doing well. I think it's elevated both of them, which I'm most pleased about. And so hopefully we'll get the signature put on it Friday night.
He's talking about Mark Glowinski and O'Day Abushi at right guard that are trying to vie it out for that starting position. Luke Jokel, he has said it since the beginning, as good a left guard as there is in the National Football League. Tom.
To watch him, I don't know that there's anyone like him, and it's just it's a cool thing to plug a person in who can be one-on-one as dominant, both run and pass, and he showed it both times out, and it's pretty cool. Wonderful practice today. It's good.
He has shown dominance in run and pass. Can I say, what would he say to me if I sat down with him and I said, Tom, can we please look at I just want to look play-by-play of the first drive. Play-by-play of the first drive, and I just want you to focus in on Jokel and tell me his level of dominance on these plays.
Yeah.
Because there were 5 plays on the first drive that he got used. Mm-hmm. He either got knocked back or they ran right around him or he whiffed on a block, and it nearly blew up the play. At least 5 times. Would Tom Cable tell me in those 5 plays, no, he won that. He won that man-on-man. You don't know football, Mitch. That's actually a win for him. When he was on his back at the quarterback's feet, on his back with his legs up in the air, with the oncoming rusher going across him to the quarterback. Would he try to tell me that that's a win? That's a dominant performance by Luke Jokel?
He might point out that there was a trip there. One of the other linemen had come across and just kind of ankle clipped him, and he was going down. He was getting pushed back, but the falling on his back had to do with the trip, he might say. But yeah, it's been a struggle. They tried on a scheme where he's the left guard. He's going to go out and he's going to pop out and he's going to block the left end, meaning
that was the first play of the game.
The end on the outside of Jermaine Ifedi, and that scheme works better when you have the running back going in the same direction to get the same flow, so that the linebackers really sense there's play action. They had the running back going in the opposite direction, and you'll go back and watch. Did they really get the desired effect from the
He's
play
telling
action?
me that Luke Jokel, it's a pleasure to watch a guy that's so dominant in both the run game and the pass game. He's telling me that that sweater is black. That is not white. That is not white.
Yeah.
That is blue. The base of your sweatshirt right now is blue. He's just telling me that. And he wants me, and I'm looking at it. It looks white to me.
But he has said that numerous times on other guys. So he sat right in front of us and said, J.R. Swayze is, as good as there is in the game at any position. He has said numerous times.
Unbelievable.
Words of encouragement and support of his players that almost leave you exasperated. So
not almost. 8:55 on 950 KJR. Jason Lockenfor is next. Where in the world is Jason at NFL training camps? All right, headlines before we get to Jason Lockenfor, and there's quite a splashy headline that just came out in the world of sports. If you're a golf fan, and I said the name Billy Payne to you, who do you think that would be? Would you know the name Billy Payne? How many of our Dick Fain, what percentage of our audience knows who Billy Payne is?
17.
17%?
Yeah.
Not 18?
Nope.
But not 16?
Not 16.
All right, so for the 83% of you that don't know who Billy Payne is the chairman. He's probably the most powerful. Would you say he's the most powerful individual in the world of golf?
More than the commissioner?
Yeah, more than the commissioner.
Yeah, probably so.
I think Billy Payne is the most powerful single individual in the world of golf. He happens to be the chairman of Augusta National. And he has decided abruptly, at least in our eyes, maybe not in his eyes, to step down after 12 years on the job. He is no longer the chairman of Augusta National. He is retiring as the chairman, and he's leaving the club into the hands of Fred Ridley, who is a very, very interesting figure to the people who cover the world of golf. Very interesting figure who's going to be the new chairman of Augusta National. Kind of a controversial figure in the world of golf on some level. A lot of people don't like Fred Ridley.
That?
A lot of people don't like Fred Ridley. Fred Ridley was a fine amateur player, very fine amateur player. And I think he's actually represented the United States in some worldwide events. But he was in the center of a controversial ruling involving Tiger Woods and the drop. Do you remember Tiger Woods and the drop?
Mm-hmm.
He was right in the middle of that. He's the guy who pulled the trigger on that. He's the guy who decided not to tell Tiger and then to tell him afterward and he was the guy. He's been the rules chairman of Augusta National. And from what I've heard and read, there are a lot of players and people that have known Ridley for a long time that are not fans of Fred Ridley. So he's the new chairman of Augusta National. Other news stories today. M's lose to the Braves last night 4-0. They're back to 2 games behind the wild card race, the American League. Tony Zick, the latest to go on the disabled list. Dan Altavilla's back after Zick has been sidelined with a flexor bundle strain, whatever that is. Tom Gable says it's either Reese Odhiambo, who will start on Friday night at left tackle, or the newly acquired Matt Tobin, who they got from Philadelphia. Rumors are that the Eagles we're gonna cut him anyway, who will be your starting opening day left tackle against Green Bay for the Seattle Seahawks. Hard to believe. Ethan Posick, not a possibility. And at this point, Luke Jokel going to remain at left guard. Ratings for the first 2 preseason games up substantially from this time last year, which is kind of interesting because I never heard that last year's were not that good. Kyrie Irving shipped to the Celtics for a package that includes Isaiah Thomas. Jay Crowder goes to Cleveland. Brooklyn's unprotected first-rounder goes also to Cleveland. Will Michael Porter Jr. end up on the Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron James? Odell Beckham Jr. apparently, his ankle injury could cost him a game or 2, at least according to ESPN. Steelers holdout running back Le'Veon Bell says, at least suggests in a tweet, that he'll return to the club on September the 1st before opening day. And Andrew Wiggins has fired his agent, and why that's a story is because this is the agent that manipulated a 5-year, $148 million max deal that's on the table for Wiggins to sign. He hasn't signed it yet. He'd like to fire the agent first, and we know why that is. 4% of the bill, $148 million, would go to the agent. So we'll see if that ends up being a lawsuit in the world of the NBA. And with that, at 9:05 on 950 KJR, courtesy of Zeke's Pizza, let's get Jason Lockenfor into the mix. Where in the world Is Jason? I'm assuming you're home. You're somewhere in Baltimore today. Is that right?
Wall Street. Yeah, I'm headed home from Ravens practice. I'm almost 2 more minutes, and I would have been on the landline for you, Mitch. We were so close. If you could have done some Arena League highlights or something else there, we would have made it. We could have timed it up.
Well, we're still going to make it because as soon as you're by, so that's 2 minutes. I got to wait until you call me from the landline.
Saying 2. Okay, you want to do it on the clock?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get a speeding ticket while I'm talking to you while I try to race home in 2 minutes.
Oh, well, you're the one who said 2.
It? 2 minutes starting when?
You're the one who said 2 minutes. I didn't say 2 minutes. It's
9:06. Let's see if I'm right or not.
Right.
Have you started the clock?
Yes, I've started it.
I'm already multitasking enough talking to you and driving, so I can't do the stopwatch.
No one told me that you were going to be on a cell phone. That's a no-no.
Are we still doing Where in the World is Jason La Canfora? It's been like the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, but
you're on cell phones a lot lately.
Yeah, but not from Baltimore. We don't. We have you from strange training camp places. Oh, you were?
Not like I was like in the sandbox with Mateo. Yeah, I just left Ravens camp.
All right. The last time I heard from you, you were beating my brains in with the Orioles over the Mariners in Game 1 of the 3-game series.
Well, no, the last time you heard from me was the day after.
Right.
And that's and then
how'd that series? I didn't get a chance to see the last 2 games of that series. How'd it work out for us?
You know, it stunk. So I had like a 7 a.m. flight after the second game, and so I'm like, I'll listen to so I'm leaving for the airport at like 5. I'm like, so let me listen to Fane and Slickhawk and. Yeah, I got a rover, and I got to hear Slickhawk, give his account of how the night went. So, and then I got on a plane and flew for 6 hours. So that was fun.
Yeah. And how'd the series end up? You didn't answer. You're good at not answering questions.
The Orioles stink, dude. They're six wins in their last 15. They've won 6 in the last 21 series. They've had 5 straight series where they've won the first game and then lost the series. Like, dude, they suck. They're not going anywhere. They're done. They had their chance. They blew it on that West Coast trip, and I mean now they're probably going to lose a series to Oakland today. They're garbage. It's the worst starting pitching in franchise history.
And you saw
how manager gets fired.
And you saw how many of the road trip games?
4 complete games. 4 ball games. They went 2-2. They went 2-2 in the games I watched all the way through, and then they were 2-4. They went 4-6. So then they were 2 games under 500 the rest of the trip.
Okay, all right. So what's going on at Ravens training camp? Jason?
No Joe Flacco throwing yet, but I do fully expect that to start. They play a preseason game Saturday. They'll have Sunday off, so I expect him to get into the practice routine starting next Monday. I'm told everything with him is just super, super, super duper precautionary. Otherwise they've got a legit defense, but that offense is. I mean, you guys have offensive line problems there, but they've got huge offensive line problems here as well, and not a whole lot of skilled players you can hang your hat on. A lot of their rookies in the last couple of years, guys who they drafted to be impact pass catchers like Rashad Perriman and Max Williams, that they can't get or stay on the field or do much of anything when they are on the field. So, yeah, it's kind of the tale of 2 teams. I think the defense could be legit top 5, top 8. Nobody's going to run the ball on them, but the offense, I don't think we'll be able to do much of anything at all.
It seems like that there's a handful of quarterback jobs that are still up in the air as we get ready for weekend number 3 in the preseason. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Browns are going to name theirs today. It's got to be Deshaun Kaiser. I can't imagine it's anybody other than Kaiser. The Bears one is interesting. I mean, Trubisky's looked pretty darn good, and the other guys looked awful. So, what's the division of labor in their 3rd and 4th preseason game? And I wouldn't be shocked if things trend the way they are, that Trubisky gets that one. Bill O'Brien, he's not going with the rookie yet. He's going with Tom Savage. But, I would just remind you of Bill O'Brien a year ago, or was it Hard Knocks a year ago? 2 years ago, where, he comes out and says, Brian Hoyer, you're my guy, you're my guy, you're my guy. Don't look over your shoulder. This is for the long haul. And then he pulls him 36 minutes into the season. So I suspect we see plenty of Watson over time, because I don't think O'Brien's going to be able to – if it's what I expect it to be with Tom Savage, I think he will eventually look at door number 2 sooner rather than later.
So you've gone around, you've seen a lot of camps, you've heard from others, you've talked to people, you've texted people. You're always on your phone, for God's sakes, when you're not texting members of the Baltimore Orioles or texting fans to try to sell your T-shirt.
That's a completely false statement. I 0.0000001% of my time on the phone is texting Orioles, probably less than that. Yeah. And I have not texted any fans about T-shirts. Emails, perhaps. But.
Okay, email. Sorry. What do you hear? What do you know? What do you think? Who are the teams? Who are the teams that maybe have surprised you? Who are the teams that you're feeling kind of a tingle for? Who you down on? Give me some Jason Lockenfor emotions, please.
I'll go through your division. Why don't we start there? The Rams, I feel their young coach a lot. I like Sean McVay. I think he will eventually figure some things out there, but I think it will be a year or two from now with a different front office, and I think that Sammy Watkins' move reaches desperation and probably won't pan out as they hope. I don't have a very good feeling about that team this year. San Francisco, I think, wins 3 times as many games as last year. I think they're a competent football team this year. I think they'll surprise some people, and I think they flirt with 6 to 7 wins, and the defense could be that front seven could be special. There's a lot of ifs involved, but could be special. I'm still a bit of a skeptic on Arizona and Carson Palmer and coaxing 16 games out of him. I mean, in general, I was kind of feeling the Titans a little bit before I got there. After being there, I was one place where I left, and I'm like, you know what, I think I was off on that team. Not that I should really let 24 hours completely change my complexion, and I still thought they were probably winning that division anyway, but I think the Titans win a bunch of football games this year. I think those guys have a special little feeling going on there. It's a really good collection of individuals, personalities, and I don't think it's going to take a whole lot to win that division. I'm high on Tampa. I know that's the second, not particularly unique to me, but I do think that's another playoff team. Dallas, I'm not really feeling. Spent some time with Cutler the last couple of days. I was at the Eagles and Dolphins were together. I think Miami's another team that's going to regress. I think Cutler's production could be better than anything they ever got out of Tannehill, but I still think that team's going to regress. I don't know about them defensively. I don't know that they're that much better than a year ago. And last year they really won a lot of close games and had a lot of things go their way. It's a much tougher schedule this year as well. I kind of like the Lions a little more than I thought I would. I still have questions about them, but that was another place where I came out of there thinking, you know what, I might have been a little too far down on them.
Okay, that's a pretty. And by the way, it's now 5 minutes. I think it's now 7 minutes since you said 2 minutes. Just so you know.
I'm bad with time.
Yeah, you're really bad with time.
Good thing we didn't bet anything.
Yeah.
I'm now literally 2 blocks away, though. So I can almost smell copper from here.
You knew when you said 2 minutes, you knew I wouldn't call you on. You figured I wouldn't call you on it, so you could say 2 minutes, even though you're a lot longer than 2 minutes.
Well, you know what? I live on a college campus, and I forgot the kids are moving in. So I got stuck on Cross Campus Drive.
Okay. There's always
3 times as long as I normally would.
There's always a very reasonable excuse, reasonable explanation.
It's fact. I'm not telling tales.
All right, so let's go through this for a second. And I know it's too early to do this. We'll do this officially in a week or so. But I'm listening to you. By the way, that was the best answer you've ever given us. That was a very complete answer. Yes, that was a great answer.
Why did you like that answer so much? Because, the more I know, the more I can give you what you want, Mitch. 10 years into this sociological experiment we have going on here.
Yeah. I just like that answer.
What did you like about the answer?
I thought it was a complete answer. I thought you went like team by team by team by team. I got a feel for who you like, who you don't like. I really liked it. I mean, I really liked it.
It's almost thorough and well-versed.
Yeah. It makes me feel like – here's what it makes me feel like. It makes me feel like that you think New England's going to win the East. It makes me feel like you think that Tennessee's going to win the South, even though Houston's going to be pretty good, but Tennessee's going to win the South. It makes me think that you think Seattle's going to win the NFC West.
Yes.
It makes me think that you are toying with the idea of picking the Giants over the Cowboys in the NFC East.
I'm going to go Giants. I have offensive line reservations, but I would go Giants.
I know you're going to pick. I know you're going to pick Green Bay, although you might consider Detroit as a wild card team.
Green Bay.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you're going to pick. I think you're going to buck the trend of going either Carolina or Atlanta, and you're going to pick Tampa to win the South.
I am.
I feel like the answer to your question of why I liked your answer is because I almost feel like I know now. You're not going to be right, but I kind of know.
That's the thing, exactly.
I know. I got a feel for who you like and who you don't like in almost every division now.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm here. That's why we do Where in the World is
Have you ever
right?
Have you ever heard of Matt Tobin?
That's a dude you guys traded for.
That's the
left
dude.
tackle. Let me ask you this seriously: are you guys talking about this at all? Because I would be if I'm up there. Do you sit Russell Wilson for this game?
Because you're afraid of getting killed?
Yeah.
Well,
risk reward. I mean, is that even like floating around in the ether?
No, because he has to.
I've been talking to some people about it around the league, and I think I would sit him. I really don't know what you.
Well, then you might as well sit him for the opener too.
Well, no, because that game counts in the standings. No, I think there's a huge difference.
You're gonna have
and that's 2 more weeks of figuring out who this guy is, and there's also going to be a ton of transactions and waiver wires, and I mean. The best guy available to you right now might not be the best guy available to you September the 9th.
Well, let's go right there. And by the way, Jason Lock in 4 for just another few minutes, then we'll have the 12th man roundtable in here with Bob Condotta and Greg Bell. They'll be together with us at the VMAC with Hugh Millen. So let's go right there. And I was going to ask you this at the top, and then I was like, he's not going to know names of left tackles that could become available. So why ask him?
Well, it's too bad because that's actually what once I write this column on the Ravens, that's actually what my next project was going to be. I was going to get out my salaries and get out my rosters and start playing, pretend you're John Schneider. Who would you be calling? The first one that popped out to me, and I don't think it happens because I don't think the Raiders move him, would be Donald Penn down there in Oakland. And if it really is critical mass, now Oakland's trying to win right now, and they don't necessarily have another left tackle, and they like their offensive line being the strength of the team. And I don't know that you want to capitulate to a guy who's holding out, but because of the unique relationship between your GM and theirs, I might say, does Javon Kearse do anything for you? Does my number 1 next year do anything for you? I would shop my 1 everywhere because it's perennially a low one, right? They're in the mix. It could be the difference between winning a Super Bowl and not with this cast. And last year, how many times did he trade down?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if that's what you're often able to do anyway, I would be shopping that and Kearse and whatever else everywhere. And I would start with Houston because they got a left tackle holding out. And that's a lot to give up. I mean, a 1 for, Donald Penn and or Dwayne Brown is a lot. They're not spring chickens anymore.
Think about this for a second, Jason, and I know that nobody wants to hear this because it's hindsight's 2020. How many years ago were we having the Joe Thomas conversation?
Dude, I've been banging the Joe Thomas drum for 2 years.
Well, since you've been banging it, think of this for a second. Let's assume
they don't want to trade him. The problem is the Browns were too stupid to trade him, and now they can't because they're going to go with a rookie quarterback.
I know that, but going back a couple years ago, when everybody was saying they wanted a first-round pick, and nobody wants to give them a first-round pick. Just think about this for a second. Had the Seahawks traded the first-round pick, whenever it was, a year and a half ago, they would have had Joe Thomas. Let me tell you something. Joe Thomas was the difference between them going out in the second round and having to play on the road in the second round to having probably home field advantage all the way through the play. He could have been
the thing, though.
What?
It takes 2 to tango. You know what I mean? Like the Browns, God love them. They people called and he's not available. And I mean, I guess if you just kept throwing picks at them at some point, they would have had to say yeah. But that's not really how you run a football team in real life. So, I mean, the problem was they never really marketed Joe Thomas. They never really entertained or engaged in Joe Thomas conversations. And they're now boxed in a corner where if I'm the Browns, I would still trade him in a split second, especially to a team that's in a bit of a desperate bind. And you're going to be able to squeeze a little more, but they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it now that they're trying to sell Kaiser as the future.
So you're saying if the Seahawks were willing to trade next year's first-round pick, and we think that'll be between like 25 and 32, if they're willing to trade next year's first-round pick today, I mean literally Wednesday, August 23rd at 9:19, if they were willing to trade it right now, could they get something? Could they get a good, solid left tackle from somebody?
I guess here's what you got to look at. Right, the NFL is all about parity. Everybody's trying to sell hope. So you got to find somebody who's willing to go to their owner and say, we really do suck. We really are hopeless, and we're a bad team with a good player, and we need to get more assets for him. Right. So that's the first caveat. The second caveat is the good teams in this league don't really. A lot of them have great starting tackles. How many bad teams have them? They're not. You know what I mean? You're not that crappy if you've got a pretty good left tackle, by and large. I mean. San Francisco in years past, you could have made a run at their guy, but not right now. I mean, Kyle Shanahan is just starting his regime. They're trying to win some games off a 2-14 season. They're not trading Staley. Like, why now? No, you know what I mean? It's a tough sell. Like, Jacksonville stinks. They don't have any offensive linemen. Jokel's there, right? I mean, he was supposed to be their left tackle. Like, just start going through the teams. Like Chicago, I don't know. I mean, what is that? Do they have anything that's better than what one of these guys you guys are entertaining now could be? And then you're going to have guys who hit the waiver wire as well who you can get for nothing. So, again, I want to go through and do this whole exercise. The thought just occurred to me talking to some other executives late last night. I haven't gotten around to really seeing, like, playing the matching game. But at first blush, there weren't, like, abundant teams. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a long list. You talked about, you'd start with the two guys who are in holdouts right now, and would you be willing to give up a ton and pay those guys, on top of what they're due to make? And then it's like, well, which really, really bad team would have a serviceable tackle or above serviceable tackle that would make sense in a trade? And again, there weren't, I think the Colts are going to be horrible, but they've got an issue with Andrew Luck, and they can't go. And I don't think their left tackle is all that good. I think he's probably a really good, potentially right tackle, and just a guy at left tackle. And they're paying him a lot of money, but they can't. You know what I mean? They got the franchises getting banged up. They can't trade it.
Yeah.
Andrew Luck's left tackle.
Yeah.
Who is hopeless now in this league where you have 2 good weekends and you're right back in it? I mean, look at all the teams that were mathematically alive last December. Am I missing something? You know what I mean? Nobody leapt out at me initially.
Okay. Well, let me just end the conversation here with this. Just a dude at left tackle that you said the one guy from Indianapolis would be. He's a good right tackle. Just a dude.
I think Costanza is more than just a dude. I mean, he can play left tackle in this.
Okay. I'll take.
But is he worth that money with a team that and you got to look at their salary cap situation as well. How much could they really even afford? What could they do with the contract? I don't think he's a guy who's worth what he's making. And he's probably a guy who they feel like they could find
I'm telling you,
than him next year in the draft. But
just a dude would be an all-pro on this offensive line. 9:22. That's it, Jason. Thanks very, very much from BMAC. Thank you very much. Jason Lockenfora, courtesy of Zeke's Pizza. We love Zeke's Pizza. Homegrown in the Northwest. And Zeke's Pizza brings you the weekly chat with Jason Lockenfora. Let's get the guys in here. Greg Bell, Tacoma News Tribune. Bob Condotta, Seattle Times, the guys who cover this team closer than anybody else, tell you the stories of the day as they get closer to the Kansas City third preseason game. And general managers, anonymous general managers around the league tell ESPN's Mike Sando that Russell Wilson is not very high a quarterback in the National Football League. We'll get their reaction on 950 KJR now. Bob Condotta is pissed.
That's like saying the sun came out.
Bob Condotta feels like the Seahawks have been disrespected again, Bob. Can you believe that general managers and coaches around the league told Mike Sando, our friend Mike Sando, that Russell Wilson is the 10th best quarterback in the National Football League? Can you believe that?
It's an outrage.
What are you going to do about this, Bob?
I don't know. Protest. Yeah.
I want you to race out onto the field with a sign that says, "Give us some respect. We're the Rodney Dangerfield of the National Football League."
Yeah.
A lot of reaction on Twitter on this list. Huh?
Well, yeah. Well, this is the time of year for that. So, Mike does that every year. I know, where he gets some anonymous comments and whatever. And who are we saying? Stafford, Carr, and I think there were 3 people in particular. People were wondering.
Carr, Stafford, Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, Phillip Rivers is pretty good, but the team obviously has
9 general managers, 6 pro personnel directors, 5 other executives, 5 head coaches, 7 offensive coordinators, 6 defensive coordinators, 5 defensive assistants, 3 analytics directors, and a Seattle Times beat reporter were asked, and they said that Russell Wilson is the 10th best quarterback in the National Football League. Andrew Luck was on the list as well.
There's a number of those quarterbacks who've not won a single playoff game. I think the argument to be made against Russell, if you can say a top 10 designation, is against him. But something to the effect, I think they tabulated all the games where the defenses held their opponents to 17 or fewer points, and it was by far dwarfing any others. So that the theory being Russell would have to do less, Greg, than any of the other quarterbacks. Where do you kind of lie on that? Is that On the one extreme, it's all about the play. Yeah, Bob, go.
I was just going to say one thing Pete Carroll
Bob's
would say.
in a mood today,
Well, no, I
ladies
was just
and
going to say.
Bobby's in a mood
But you're
today.
right. Everybody says that. So the defense always holds them down. But one thing Pete Carroll would say is our defense allows so few points in part because our quarterback's not giving away free points on offense.
Yep.
So
See,
when you play with
Bob
a certain style.
Condotta's pissed. He just proved it. He's pissed. He's pissed about the Russell Wilson. What do you think, Greg?
First of all, I grew up in Pittsburgh in the 70s. Terry Bradshaw, 4 rings. And this reminds me when 16 years ago I first got into sports writing. I was a beat writer for the Sacramento Bee, covering the Oakland A's, traveling around Major League Baseball. Ken Maka was the manager of the A's at the time. I had a Cy Young vote that year. Roger Clemens was 24-4, something, but with an ERA at near 4, and somebody else had an ERA at 2, but his record was 500-ish. And Ken Maka, the manager of the Oakland A's, said to me, because I asked him, well, what would you do, Ken, if you had a vote? He goes, Greg, it's about wins and effing losses. That's what the sport is about. That's what the starting pitcher is about. That's what starting quarterbacks are about. And as you mentioned, Derek Carr and Matthew Stafford have as many playoff wins as I do. And that's why Russell Wilson.
How many do you have?
Not that many.
We forget his 7 years in Tampa Bay. Just kind of went into well, yeah, I mean, Russell is always going to not rank maybe as highly as he should in some of these because he's just not conventional. I think there's just a lot of people who still just a quarterback is supposed to be a big, tall guy who stands back there and wings it like Rivers does or Stafford does or whatever.
And I think a lot of those general managers in that poll would still draft Russell Wilson in the 3rd round today. Because of his stature.
But we don't know what Russell Wilson would look like if he had a couple of good receivers and he had a terrible defense and he had a good offensive line.
He has
and he
one
was playing,
pretty darn good receiver, but
yeah, he does. But my point, Bob, was going to be, let's put him in a system where they lose 7 or 8 games a year, or they're losing in the 4th quarter, and he gets to throw it 35, 40 times and improvise. And
we've seen that a few times.
2015.
And so maybe he would be a 5,000-yard passer.
He was
in that situation, and maybe he'd be higher. Then therefore he'd be higher on these polls because they seem to be liking the guys that throw for 300 yards.
What I think he could do is put up the same kind of numbers Matt Stafford does and have the same win-loss record Matt Stafford does.
That's true.
Because I think he's playing in a way that allows his team to maximize what they have wins-loss wise, which is what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, Bob makes the point about him having a different style. And I do think there is something to that. And when you watch him, and some of these guys presumably see him on tape, there are aspects of his game that nobody can duplicate in a positive sense. Nobody's elusive like him and just kind of does his friend.
Extends plays.
Yeah, plays off script and what have you. By the same token, if you had a low light reel, of the 5% of worst of – no, the 5% of any player, let's just call them quarterbacks, is going to be really bad, of course. But his 5% worst, he kind of misses – open receivers, and he doesn't have a sense of where he's going with that. And so I think
can't be missing that many, though. He's got the 2nd highest passing efficiency rating in the history of the NFL.
No, I don't mean accuracy. He misses with his eyes. Let me clarify.
Oh, okay.
So he So he starts into the Tarkenton routine. He also has the most amount of throwaways in the last 4 or 5 years. He throws more passes away than anybody in the league, which, to Pete Carroll's way of thinking, okay, you're protecting the football. But there are some guys on that list. I'm not trying to defend the list. I'm not trying to defend Russell. I think he's about a top 6 or 8. I keep saying that. I routinely say I think he's a top 6 guy. But I'm trying to get a little bit of a layer of the onion on what they might see. And what you do see sometimes that might exasperate you is that he goes into a Tarkenton routine and he could have just had an easy completion that a more conventional quarterback would have gone. So it's to your point, he has a different brand of playing quarterback really well.
All right, Hugh Millen's here, Greg Bell's here, Bob Condotta's here. Hugh and I, and even Greg and I, have discussed a lot this morning. I haven't heard from you yet in your mood. Bob Condotta, the Seattle Times. The insanity of the fact that Reese Odhiambo or Matt Tobin is going to be protecting the 10th best quarterbacks blindside. I guess it doesn't really matter because he's only 10th best quarterback, so who cares about him? Let him get hurt. Matt Tobin or Reese Odhiambo. I'm going to guess that even you, Bob, 72 hours ago, if I said, who's Matt Tobin, you would have had no idea who he was.
Yeah, I would have had a hard time with that one.
Okay. All right. And Reese Odiombo, if I had asked you 72 hours ago, you would say, maybe not say it on the air, maybe you'd whisper to me in my ear, I don't think he's very good. These are the two guys? Really? This is what we're down to on Survivor Island, on Left Tackle Island?
Yeah, it is pretty amazing for how well this team is constructed in so many other ways, and then continue to be kind of back to that, and it being the one spot on the, you went into the season thinking if there's one spot they don't need to. I mean, obviously you don't need Russell Hurd or Earl Hurd or whatever, but in terms of a position group where you really just needed to get through it healthy, it was the offensive line, and then they suffered, almost to the worst possible injury you could have to a guy there. So yeah, no doubt it is crazy, and there's probably still a pretty good chance Luke Jokel ends up out there. I think they just want to try this first, and I think they want to try it in sort of the lowest pressure. So you can't suddenly try Reese Odiombo in week 2 or 3. Yeah, going on the road to Tennessee or something and say, hey, okay, we want to go to Jokel back. This is the time to try Reese Odiombo and give it a shot. So I think that's part of what they're doing here, and they're just gonna all out sell it and be like, yeah, it's his turn. He's got to do it. We're prepping him all week. He's going to take all the reps all week, and he's going to get the best possible opportunity to look good here. And then if he can't, then you've still got time to go back to.
Well, I will
2 or 3 or 4
or 5 or 6 or 8. Can you guys stay for the next segment, or are you running out?
I think so.
Yeah. Bob, if you can't, you can't. I understand. By the way, Lock and Fora, just before you guys came on, wondered aloud if John Schneider called the Raiders with a holdout left tackle, or if he called the Texans with a holdout left tackle and offered them next year's number 1 first-round draft choice. He wondered aloud whether maybe, just maybe, they don't want to acquiesce to these holdouts, whether one of those guys or somebody else might be available for a first-round draft choice. I don't know.
That's a tough salary cap thing.
Exactly.
It is a tough.
That's going to take money, and that guy's only going to sign if he knows he's got more than
a lot of money.
Well, John Schneider talks to the Oakland Raiders GM, I think, every 5 minutes.
Yes,
so
I think he's going to get a guest here at training camp.
Yeah, today. He was in the press box at their first game. I know that.
And 9:39 with the 12th man roundtable. Another segment live from the VMAC on 950 KJR.
KJR.
Sports Radio 950 KJR has teamed up with Target Zero and Shuttle Express to bring you the ultimate ticket giveaway. SportsRadioKJR.com. Tickets, black car, round trips, the Doobie Brothers. I can't even believe I'm saying that. The Doobie Brothers? The Eagles, Katy Perry. Are the Doobie Brothers still the same brothers? Is it new crop of guys? CenturyLink Field, Safeco Field, Husky Stadium. You were at a concert I saw. Where the hell were you the other night? You were
Tom
complaining
Petty.
about the audio going out.
Well, wasn't
you were being
I don't think
Bob
I was the
Condotti
only
and you
one
were
complaining about it. I think most people.
What'd you do? Want to hear it or something?
You're at a concert. You can't hear anything. So.
Are they just moving their mouths? You can't do.
Well, they kept playing, but the speakers were out.
Okay.
So,
it was Doobie Brothers.
Just remember, drunk, drugs, or high, it's a DUI. So always travel safely. Okay, with Greg Bell, Tacoma News Tribune, Bob Condotta, Seattle Times, Hugh, Breedlove Millen. Bob is just livid over how low Russell Wilson is on the Sando ESPN.com list today. Today is Family Day, Bob. Are you bringing your kids out here to jump around in the?
Well, I'm not considered part of the family here.
So. You're not. You're not. How long of practice were you allowed to watch yesterday?
Did
they leave you out here? They
Yeah,
forget?
no, it's about 20 minutes or whatever.
Do you try to hide, like, behind one of the posts so they don't see you, and then they don't tell you to have to go back inside? Like, when the teacher okay, I won't get you guys in any more trouble than you already are. Greg Bell and Bob Condotta and Hugh Breedlove Millen are here. Let's talk about some other personnel groups on the football team. We talked a lot about wide receiver yesterday. You guys concluded pretty much that it's done. The wide receiver is done, depending upon whether they keep 5 or 6. They're not going to keep 7, are they? They're not going to keep 7. Right, Bob?
Well, they could. Yeah, I mean.
Well, they could keep 12. Are they going to keep 7?
No, I've had them with 7 just because if you.
Where did you have them with 7, Bob? Where did you have them with 7, Bob?
Yeah, in the Seattle Times.
Okay, all right.
No, they have J.D. McKissick is sort of the wild card there to me, just because of the whole return and what he can do there, and he sort of appears to be the only other. I mean, obviously other guys can return, like Paul Richardson or whatever, but guys that you would want to maybe do it and potentially take those hits and things like that.
Are we ready to knock out Greg? Are we ready to remove Tyler Lockett from return duties. And
that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying remove it.
I didn't say you said Bob is very on edge today. I didn't say that you said that. I'm just wondering, injuries, and we've seen this with guys in the past, that as they become more valuable at their regular positions, they becomes a little more dangerous to put them in harm's way on special teams. Does Tyler Lockett go back out there, and is it worth the buck on special teams? Is his bang worth the buck on special teams?
I think it still is. I think maybe that you'll start seeing him edge toward more situational roles, whereas if a punt's coming inside the 30 or 20, they won't put him back there. But if it's in the middle of the field, they'll put him back there. He's still a Pro Bowl. He was a Pro Bowl kick returner 2 seasons ago as a rookie. He's going to be back there when they need yardage in the kick game. I could see a J.D. McKissick role for fair catching and securing possession and not getting the big returns.
Well, Doug Baldwin could be out there for
Richard Sherman could for that
fair,
matter.
for fair catching. Are you looking at me like you're giving me the eagle eye? What do you think about all this eagle eye?
There's no eagle eye at all.
I haven't seen those guys do that this year, though. In past years, you've always seen Sherman out there, and I haven't seen Sherman do that.
Well, here's what I remember. I remember a guy named, when I was in Washington, there was a guy named Darryl Green. You guys remember Darryl Green. And he was a great punt returner. But they never used him unless it was like the playoffs or it was like a game in the fourth quarter that they needed a punt return. He'd go out there on very special occasions.
I don't think we're there yet with Lockett.
Okay. What do you think about that?
I think as long as he's even remotely injured, he should be, preserving himself.
So you don't want him out there?
I don't want him out there unless he's 100%.
Okay. Well,
or near 100%. I mean, he's coming back and so I think it's good to have McKissick around as a competent backup.
Linebackers. The linebacker spot that Bob will tell me is never on the field, so it doesn't really matter all that much. So let's not talk about it that much. Who's going to win that job? Is that Garvin? Is that Will Hoyt? Is that a guy that I don't know? Who's going to win that job?
Will Hoyt, we suddenly haven't been seeing much out here.
He's missed all week of practice.
He's got a hell of a beard. Is he the guy with the big beard?
Yeah. So you're right. Yeah, the beard should be on the 53 for sure. But yeah, he's the leader in the clubhouse for it, but we haven't seen him at all. So yeah, Terrence Garvin has been doing it as well. They actually had Dewey McDonald doing it the other night a little bit, and. Marcus. I don't know if Marcus Smith really would factor into that. I think they see him more as a guy who could help him pass rushing and things like that. But maybe that's a way to get him on the roster. Sort of is thinking he could help him out at that spot if they really needed it.
Greg, how many guys in the defensive line rotation in a given game where they take series on and off and on and off? And Hugh points out, and rightfully so, that when the Seahawks defense was at its very best. I mean, very best. They're always good, but when they were at their very best. Guys like Averill and Bennett played less plays over the course of a season. They were fresher at the end because you had bodies that you really trusted and depended on. Who are those bodies? Have we already pretty much decided who they're going to be, or are a couple of those spots up for grabs in these next couple of preseason games? Where do we stand on the defensive line rotation?
Well, they typically go as many as 8 in the first quarter of games. I mean, they'll bring in hockey line changes of 4 new guys on a specific drive. They'll go up to 9 in a game. Hugh's right. There's document. We've written it that the Super Bowl year they beat the Broncos to win the Super Bowl, it was below 70% for their starting defensive ends in pass rushing. So they brought them in third, fourth quarters when the rest of the field was tired, and those guys were fresh. And that's the idea. Now, here you ask me who – they're going to have 8. David Bass is an interesting case.
He's got a little punch to his pass rush, doesn't he?
And he gets a lot of –
Bob really likes him.
First-team time here later in camp. And he's a guy who they might not have had big plans for, who could be the 9th, 8th, 9th type of guy. But if you look at 8, you got Clark, Averill, Bennett, Rubin, Reed, Nas Jones.
That's 6.
So there's 6. And you've got to think Cassius Marsh because of his special
7.
teams. 7.
Quentin Jefferson,
Jefferson, they're not going to give up on him yet because he's a draft pick that he wasn't on the field last year. So that's 8. So now does David Bass become 9?
Well, did David Bass make the last rendition of the Seattle Times?
Well, he did
project
actually.
a roster.
He did. Yeah.
Is he on the fence?
I went with 9.
Is he on the fence?
Well, he's sort
I
of
don't
on
have
the
a
fence.
bell.
Yeah, he's
Sorry,
like the
I can't
ninth
ring the
guy.
bell.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, obviously he's sort of on the fence because he's the ninth one. But
yeah,
no, I had him making it, and he sort of makes it because Malik McDowell's not around. I mean, you would have had. You would have had him, obviously, as it. So someone else was sort of going to make the roster because of that.
When are they going to officially announce Malik McDowell on the PUP list for not the PUP, the injured reserve list?
When they go
they won't.
53 to start.
They'll put him on. They'll leave him on the NFI just in case he can play.
Okay. Well, unless they know he can't play.
But even then, why do that? There's no reason to do that.
Okay.
You don't have to do that.
Okay.
The other reason to put him, by the way, on the NFI is that if they wanted to play hardball with him, they can take money away from where if we put him on IR, he gets paid
I don't know
fully.
that stuff.
You know, to underscore how the rotation was so vital at that time and then how much has changed, they had the number one snaps was about 580 or 582. And then the number of people that were within 80% of that, they had 7 guys within 80% of the top.
Wow.
And the second place team, Seattle led that by a mile. The second place team was the Giants that year at half of that. And then one other point, remember when the Seahawks tied the Cardinals? So you say, well, and there's all this talk, well, these guys played an extra quarter. We got to really mind their bodies. And it was a big topic, like, are they going to have the juice to play? Well, if you take the reps where Bennett and Avrill's reps increased off of the Super Bowl year, some of those guys, it was the equivalent of playing overtime. Whatever their reps had been at 2013, it was the equivalent of playing overtime every single week and the entire 15-minute duration of overtime. So they really changed, and these guys were getting older. They got to feel like they want to be more like they were in 2013.
That sounds like a future. Hugh's got something to say.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, they did spend their first-round draft pick trying to address that problem this year. I mean, it's not like they haven't sort of acknowledged that they wanted to do that.
All right.
I mean, a first and a third, to try to specifically do that this year. But
Bob, that's enough. That's enough out of you. Greg, thank you. Bob, thank you. Hugh, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Have a good day with all the family. Go. I want to see Bob. I want to see a tweet. I want to see a tweet from Bob Condotta of him in one of the bouncies. Now, that would be a tweet that would be worth following, Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times. Thank you, guys. Enough from us. Another show next from here at the VMAC.